It doesn't matter.
I think.
I got the same thing. It doesn't matter that's on a pallet.
I know.
Because we're gonna get a new shop in a few
She's
years
involved
anyways.
with them, and she's in
Like 10, 5 years
another
or something.
sustainability group.
And there should be room in the shop
And
for
town.
air compressor.
Here,
I think it's
Well,
here.
you don't necessarily listen to it. though.
you guys have that CEC
A lot of
for the
times.
community.
I
Yes,
would-
it's
I
not the
would
CDC,
test it
it's,
Out back, put somewhere around, because you want to listen to them.
I think
This one's supposed
she's
to be
been on a
quiet.
couple of them. She was on,
It's not supposed to be
she
super
answers
loud.
questions
I heard
sometimes,
that.
there'll be speakers, and she'll take the chat questions.
I mean, what-
Oh.
I was told it was really quiet, but,
She had long hair.
well, it says
Yeah.
it's supposed to be,
She has a
it's
really
supposed to be
nice
inside,
screen
that's why we're
on
building a
behind
shed
her.
for it.
Yeah.
So, I don't know,
What
we'll
is
find
her
out.
name?
Sometimes they have
You know,
outdoor compressors.
She was saying how we were
I'm moving.
on before one of the forums one time.
But it's not-
All of us.
Yeah,
She and her daughter.
It's not like it's gonna, it's like constantly used, it's gonna,
If you get a chance.
Yeah, but you have
Ask
rain.
her about her daughter in shop class.
yeah.
Her daughter.
But it's inside, it's not, it's gonna be constantly used where it's gonna be going on.
But anyway,
5
she was
times
a
a day.
student of mine.
Yeah.
She took us to sustainability.
The whole reason why we asked for a new one, the old one's fine. We just,
Got
there
it
was
with
a
a
leak,
architecture firm that.
there was stuff going on, it was super
I
loud.
forget, I think it's the name of the second.
So is this the last class?
So cool.
Yeah.
Probably is.
They've already taken
But I.
the math class, weatherization, and
And we're,
Green
I
building.
just thought today.
Yeah,
we
my
had
only one
fun.
left is this next one, 115.
We'll do the public utilities. Commission.
That's right.
what were you doing
Last
last time?
The taxes
I think
on
you had
our.
another class.
Yeah, that's great use of them, great use of them.
Like,
Better than paying for electricity.
Great budget.
But I think too, to be able to be able to.
That's probably the
access
last time I
our-
wanted to
mean,
see it.
Yeah.
Last time, that was the last time I just saw Hamer, he came and dropped off his test.
the Constructions.
I won't see him ever again.
Which
Yeah,
is
it's great to
fascinating.
see.
I think having on Zoom too, in a way, has been kind of a business.
Yeah, yeah.
Because at least if you're signed up.
Unless you wanna work the whole
That
cap.
happened to me-
You can
that
go.
happened to me on actual ballot. I wasn't able to make it on 15,
Right.
but it's
You can
recorded,
have,
so you can watch it.
Yeah, it's great.
You can work for the contract, one of our contractors.
We did a lot of stuff. in that.
No, John, was trying to convince-
Oh,
convince my
you
neighbor
know,
to- convince my neighbor
out
to
there,
convince
you
me
know,
to-
Tom Maselli?
No, what go work
So
there?
Tom
Yeah,
Maselli,
you work it- you work it out back.
probably,
Do
their
what?
construction program.
Oh,
No, I
Out there,
think
close to the
building
kids.
is-
Yeah, I know, yeah, I know the solar, I know the guy that built the
Oh,
solar.
how they, repairing it, or, we're not repairing it, remodeling it.
Yeah.
We're gonna redo all the siding, level the cabins. I don't think we're doing anything inside, but we should.
The carpenters are, area around. They're accountant guys.
On the airport, right?
Tim Rose,
Um,
probably, you met him? He goes up there sometimes when we're doing more work up there to get hours and stuff.
Well, we had some guys come out and did everything.
I don't think you can get them here. No, he's just like.
And, what was-
But
I don't wanna make you work too hard.
So again, like exercise.
I'm John.
Nice meeting you.
probably the food.
On the Lewis game.
Teachers, Lewis.
Yeah.
You remember?
No,
My dad's first name.
How do you spell it?
Oh, you are.
Oh, okay.
Everybody loves to.
This is a
Yeah,
Super, super good.
different to LE,
Yeah.
which is more common.
Hey, well, little structure, Kenny first.
Well, welcome, looking forward to this.
No, I
See, hopefully I can give you guys an intro to some stuff that's coming up or out there that
They
might
like,
excite you later on.
someone is kind of
I
$3
helped
million
plant one actually,
on the.
What's that?
a green room.
John, natural garden.
Yes, sir.
Did you transfer
Yeah,
that one
yeah.
that was there?
Yeah, on SBCC.
No, I just started.
Campus.
No.
Yeah. Are you gonna talk about that? at all?
Yeah.
You want to try to do that one? We can do that.
And the
Are we one or two
protected
behind?
area has to go,
There's a whole bunch of
You,
different
you,
layers.
you uploaded Mondays?
to be waterproof.
Yeah, there's a variety of different. I think I already put a layer matrix that you can, in your system, really
I
depends on
don't
what the foundation is.
Okay.
And then how.
But just check the numbers and see.
Okay.
But that's gonna be a challenge, because you get plants to go through it, and then,
Right, and you have to
I
think
don't
about
technically-
water and the weight.
Technically, don't even have to be at the spot. Right?
so there's a lot of frustrated.
Yeah, I wouldn't-
But I want to be a good student, show up to as many classes as I can.
Yeah, that's what I like to hear.
I don't want to be like, some that won't be named,
Yeah,
Starts with an A.
it brings his test in and then leaves. I know, I hear you.
His last class,
What?
his last class.
Well, he is going somewhere, so. Yes, last class period, right?
I just feel for the fun of it.
He gets 3 shots?
Yeah, 3 shots, but how often does this class run? Once every 2 years?
Yeah, about that.
If you're lucky.
Yeah. If it fills.
This is gonna be your chair. I'll vacate.
Oh, it's all good,
It looks like my desk, get everything. set up. And all the demonstration stuff over there, yeah. Great. The whole field of construction in one lesson, is that, as I understand it?
depends how much energy these guys have. I hope you guys brought the coffee. If not, Lisa will carry us through.
Okay.
What are you guys doing?
Good.
I was gonna ask, general introduction, maybe we can just kind of go over like who you guys are. So we're not just like a quick name and what do you guys do for work?
Yeah, let me introduce Dan first, because you may be wondering who this stranger is that's telling you what to do already. No, they know you were coming. So this is Daniel Bell, and I'm gonna let him talk about his past. I know a little bit about it, but he knows more about it. And then we also have another visitor, Lisa Eklund, and we'll have her mention what her reason for being here is. And then we'll listen to all of them, sure.
Are we required to wear masks? We need to?
The students are, but when I'm lecturing, I don't, because they can't hear me through my muffler.
Okay,
So you can,
take it off from phone.
I would, because you can hear you better.
Talking for about an hour and a half, since it's gonna get real hot.
Well, we got the air conditioner.
You're passed out.
I'm just inside this thing.
So what's your, well, so Daniel's looking into teaching here. I should tell you that. That's the reason he's here. So we're having him come up and do this lesson. And we've been talking on the phone a bit. And he's pretty knowledgeable, probably more than me in a lot of these areas. So this will be good tonight. So anything else you want to say about your background?
I was gonna go into a little bit in the slides, but not really. I currently I teach at the high school level. I've been teaching construction trades for 11 years. And I see you guys have a tiny house up there. I don't know how many of you guys are really into sustainable building and design, but I have a pretty extensive background in that. I spent a lot of time traveling the country with the guy who made all that stuff popular. His name's Jay Schaefer. He's my old business partner. So I used to teach a lot of traveling tiny house workshops and sustainable design, which is where a lot of these displays kind of come from. I've sold mine of them since then. And I have but in general, kind of like some of you guys are pretty young, right out of high school, and some of you guys are a little bit older. When I was young out of high school, I was working for a best friend's father out of Hesperia, and I was doing all the grunt work, basically building anything and everything he needed. And we built tract homes that he ended up holding on to and renting out, as opposed to selling and flipping, and commercial property. And his dad owns like, I don't know, I may be exaggerating a little bit, but not by much. His dad probably owns half of like Bear Valley, Hesperia, downtown area. It's pretty incredible the way he would flip stuff down there. So when I was a kid, I used to help build a lot of stuff. That's where I got my education, was basically doing anything and everything you needed. If it was electrical week, I was doing electrical. If it was concrete week, he gave me a set of boots and said, get out there, here's a, this or that and whatever, a camper. And I learned on the job. And you go and store shoulders, and you learn the next time you're doing concrete, you give that tool to somebody else and you get something else, you know what I mean?
You get better.
So that's the hard way to learn, but it's a good way to learn. You know it after that. So that was my kind of upbringing. And then I kind of took a lot of you guys here in college classes. I decided I wanted to be a teacher early on and realized to teach, it's good to have an educational background besides the trade side of things. So I went through the process of going through community college, Cal State Los Angeles with construction or industrial technology. And now I'm working on a master's in construction technology, project management for the UAB. So
Hey, when you were out in Hesperia, did you ever go by CalEarth out there? And
I have not seen CalEarth yet.
yeah,
So-
you should go out.
Everybody, when I go to Temple House,
Yeah.
they talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I haven't been to college yet.
Yeah, it's worth going to.
So
I used to have a bunch of pictures on it, but anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, you guys all can introduce yourselves to Dan, starting with. Okay.
I'm Dennis.
Nice to see you.
You
What do you do for work?
too. Framer.
Okay,
Sorry.
right on.
Yeah.
Awesome. Why are you taking the classes?
To learn this stuff.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Good reason.
He used to work for Hayward Lumber
Yeah, you
for
took a little
quite a
bit.
while.
All right.
That's what started me, and then now you.
So you got a lumber background, a
Yeah.
little bit of knowledge in lumber. Yeah, my strongest subject is woodworking. I'm a finished carpenter. I would say by trade and passion, I'm a high-end finished woodworker. And I found it was really hard for me to make custom furniture and make a living in Southern California, especially you guys out here in Santa Barbara. So I learned that making kitchens is where you can make a lot of money and still do decent high-end woodwork. So my construction licenses are General B and C6 finished carpenter.
Yeah.
Woodworking related. Um,
Hi, my name is Alec.
Alec or
Alec
Alex?
with a C,
Got it.
yeah.
Okay.
So, Yeah, I'm working with a local contractor, and I started about 8 months ago. Just brand new to the industry, so I've just been learning from the ground up. It's been a really great experience, just kind of helping out wherever needed, getting thrown into the fire and learning a lot,
You liking it?
loving it.
Perfect.
Yeah, I love learning something new every day,
Yeah.
so.
One of the beauties of being in construction, you guys will get a lot of new scenery, different things that always be exciting and new. Won't be a stagnant cubicle.
Yeah,
That's one of the things that's great about construction.
yeah, so, yeah, it's been really good.
Cool. What About
John Tapia. I work here in town at a retirement community. I'm a maintenance supervisor.
Mhm.
So my job is mainly project management, so I kind of oversee a lot of the construction. So I'm in the program to learn a little bit about all the trades and kind of just know how things are done and help me with my job.
you said it's John?
Yeah, John Tapia.
Yep, you're up, kind of, I'm sorry. I gotta take notes, and write things down so I can remember.
Hello there, my name is Jose Silva.
Jose?
Yeah, Jose. I work for a company called Coastal Community Builders located in Budget. And I am a finished carpenter there.
Right on. Did you take this class to learn anything specific?
No, just to get achieve the degree and learn everything else.
He heard that the teachers were so great, he couldn't. remember.
I met the teachers at work, brought me here.
What about yourself?
My name is Joel. and-
Joel?
Yeah. And I work for a local company here as a general laborer, and I'm working my way to be a carpenter.
All right. What kind of stuff are you doing right now?
Well, right now I'm doing a bit of finishing work,
Okay.
remodeling the house. So they're teaching me a little bit about finishing right now,
Cool.
finish carpentry.
Perfect.
Yeah.
You like it?
Yeah, it's awesome.
Detail oriented stuff. You learn a lot about yourself doing construction.
Yeah, yeah, you do.
Lisa, I'll come back to you. Want to introduce yourself?
I'm Dylan Mitchell. I work at El Capitan Canyon, doing maintenance.
Okay. And you're trying to learn something specific in these programs or?
No, just get knowledgeable on how to do stuff.
Okay.
I grew up with my dad that was a contractor and trying to get into that with him. He introduced me to everything.
Cool. Perfect.
Benjamin or Ben.
Yeah.
I've been coming back and forth to the restaurant business and the construction business. And I figured that I do like this more, and I decided just to get more knowledge by coming and taking some classes. And so I've done, I'm currently, I would say I'm a jack of all trades, but I would like to learn a little bit more about woodworking.
You go by Ben or Ben?
I guess more often Ben. Mhm.
You want more woodworking specific information? I'm happy to talk to you afterwards. We
Thank
can
you.
talk about that for weeks. All right.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, your name again was? Dennis. Dennis, that's right. And then, Louis?
Yeah, Louis, I'm a TA for the Environmental Horticulture Department here at SUCC on the main campus. Manage a couple of gardens over there and do basically like landscape contracting and irrigation.
All right. You work outside a lot.
Oh, all day, every day,
Yeah.
7 days a week.
You like it? You like working outside?
I love it. Yeah, it's great.
And remember your name again, back?
John,
John, that's right. I should easily remember that one. All right. John, what do you do for work?
I'm a carpenter
Okay.
and I'm taking these classes as a kind of finishing touch to get my contractor license.
Okay. How long have you been doing it?
About 10 years.
Okay. Have you been studying for the law portion of your license? It's probably the hardest part for you to pass at this point. You've been doing it 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's, I think that was my biggest challenge when I got my license was getting the law portion. Because you don't practice that every day when you do the trade. Cool, awesome. Lisa, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Lisa Eklund, and I have worked with Daniel Bell when I worked for a career pathway grant down in Ventura for the Ventura County Office of Education. I was hired as their construction liaison, and I ended up getting the job because I had been taking the construction technology program at Ventura College, and I would have never known that the job was there and available. And so for about 5 years, I worked with the high school teachers and the community colleges that had classes in manufacturing, architecture, and construction. My background is in construction. I'm a general contractor, not practicing because I don't want to chase down money. But I started about 25 years ago. I wasn't enough of a tomboy to pound nails, and I was tending bar in the restaurant business. And it was at a private club, and the gentleman that I met turned out to be Gary Hardy, who came up with a Hardy panel, which if you guys know what those are on either side of the garage door. So I said, I'd really like to learn about construction. I don't know anything about it. And I can't sit still to draw plans. And so it's like, well, the guys are, just cutting blocks out of full sticks of lumber. So I need the site cleaned up. So I started out picking up trash and lumber behind a framing crew in the middle of summer out in Simi Valley for a couple of years. So then I would schlep around all the pump jack scaffolding and materials that went on to be an assistant superintendent for Greystone Homes and then a superintendent for Lennar Homes.
Wow, a lot of qualified people in this room tonight.
Well, hopefully we're gonna have some fun.
Yeah.
I get really excited about this stuff. You guys can always shut me down to move on to the next topic if you feel like it's a little too far from what you guys want to cover tonight. We got plenty of things we can cover and introduce.
So I'll just be around to help you with the computer.
All right. Get started. All right. So I kind of gave you guys what you have in front of you is a little different than this. It's kind of the modified version. My review, if you will, or the conclusional review. I am going to cover all of these basic things tonight, just touching on them, introductions, so you guys understand what they are and know that they're out there. I'm sure you guys are going to be familiar with a lot of stuff already, but hopefully we can expand on it just a little bit. So we're going to start with defining green a little bit because it's kind of a funky term, a little ambiguous, maybe a little, we already did the intro. So when you guys think green, What do you think of?
Plans.
Plants? Okay,
Green building.
green building? What does it mean to you?
Green building to me means, you know, low VOCs. Basically using the right material. Can properly use Tyvek, you know, stuff like that.
Okay. Anybody else have something they attach green to?
Recycling.
Recycling, all right. Something we're taught pretty young age nowadays. Anything else? You know, no one thinks of just maybe the color green, right? And they say, oh, that's green. What does that mean, right? We've really kind of turned it into this buzzword nowadays. We've attached all these different meanings, recycling and, you know, different materials to it. So this is kind of my personal joke, you know, looking at the primary colors, the joke is, you know, green is really the mixture of yellow and blue. But so I don't ever use the term green. I kind of hate or I shy away from it. If you really want to be specific with your terminology and be really understood, I prefer to use the word sustainable in place of most of the time when we use the word green, I would replace that with the word sustainable. And so as we go through tonight, you're going to see the word green in a lot of these slides. I want you to think as we're doing that, think the word sustainable in your mind, and maybe it'll really help position what we're talking about with green. So these are a lot of other buzzwords that you're going to hear. These are things that I think are going to become really commonplace if they're not already. It seems like a lot of you guys might already be familiar with these things, which are environmentally friendly, ecologically sound, reduced carbon footprint, or this buzzword that I first got introduced probably about 10 years ago, embodied energy, right? When you start talking about is that car, maybe is the Toyota Prius, is that really more efficient than something like a Hummer? You know, which one has more embodied energy? Which one's really consuming more energy over its entire life cycle? So all these terms that we kind of get into when we start talking about green. So I wanted to start out with this concept of cradle to cradle. This book is something that came out in like 2002, I believe. And it's kind of a neat book, just as a book. But even more so, it's interesting because the book itself is made of recycled material. It's plastic. You can read this in a bathtub and it won't become destroyed or damaged. And one of the main concepts of this thing, I kind of broke them down for you right here. Getting rid of the known culprits. So known culprits would be things like things that we know are bad for us in the environment. You know, if there's bad gases, bad toxins, you know, things that are really commonplace in construction. We know lead's not good for us. We don't really use it commonly in building anymore. We know asbestos is not good for us, right? So stuff like that, we try to avoid those things, known culprits. And this is really general about everything in our built environment, not just construction. But they introduced these concepts to us with this term cradle to cradle. Follow informed personal preferences, creating a positive list. And there's, on the next slide, I'm going to show you, there's a really good summary of these things that's created by a blogger who broke them down to very understandable language in every day. Activate the positive list and reinvent stuff all the time. And the main reason I brought this up to you guys, and I wanted to start with this, and why this relates to roofing, because as people who are getting into construction, you guys are the next generation that's building our environment, our built environment. You're building our buildings that house us, the infrastructure. You're going to someday maybe own the businesses that make the big decisions, that control the money, that do all these things. Our decisions, and your decisions specifically, are going to be really paramount. They're going to be very influential in what we end up doing with our society. And our decisions have tough consequences, especially when we start having green built environments. So there's a certain paragraph, I want to read you one paragraph from this, that talks about our decisions, things that you wouldn't think of. How many of you guys know what floaties are? So things you put on in the pool, little kids wear around their arms, right? I think they call them wings or something here. So that's what we're talking about. Okay, it's an analogy that they make that's easy to understand, kind of. So it says, even products ostensibly designed for children can be crude products. An analysis of a child's swim wing, that's what they call it, swim wing, made from polyvinyl chloride, it's PVC, the same stuff we said like yellow pipes made from, garden pipes, you know. Showed that off-gassed potentially harmful substances, including under heat, hydrochloric acid, Other harmful substances like plasticides and phthalates may be ingested through contact. This scenario is particularly alarming in a swimming pool, since a child's skin is 10 times thinner than the skin of an adult when it gets wet and wrinkly, which is the ideal condition for absorbing toxins. Once again, in purchasing swim wings, you've inadvertently purchased a product or a product plus, their terminology, and you got a flotation device, and you got the unwanted child plus or unasked for toxins. So all these decisions that we make when we're building houses, if you put a product on a wall, I don't know how many of you guys are familiar that most of the, if you guys built with exterior grade plywood, probably 10 years ago plus, it's changing rapidly now, probably had formaldehyde and glues, right? And so if that's in your interior airspace, now all of a sudden you're breathing that in, especially if your house is becoming really airtight. And that's one of the new trends we're going towards, right? Is airtight homes. Some of you guys you'll explore that as you get more into green construction, passive homes, or some of these SIP products, other designs we're going to talk about tonight. And so all of these things really affect our health long term. So I want you to kind of keep that in mind. That's kind of where we're going with this, is the decisions that we make all have ripple effects and consequences, whether we see them today or not down the road. So this is the brief summary. I'm not going to read through all these for you guys, but you guys can kind of take a look at those. I will point out a couple things from them real quick, and that is that the positives, right? Known positives, begin comprehensive redesign. They're pretty much talking about, this is kind of a distant connection to construction itself, but they're talking about a few things that are a little bit hard to connect to a realistic environment, a realistic world. When we're talking about things like a biological world and a technical, making sure all that stuff's heavily controlled. And then when they say reinvent, they're talking about reinventing the way we create everything from the ground up so that it intentionally is made to work the way we want it to work. So if we think about it from cradle, when it very first starts at a youth as a product, to cradle again as it's completely used, like think of a soda can. If you guys were to take an actual aluminum can, you were to use it, it doesn't last very long, you throw it away in a recycle can, it can get recycled and it comes back like 99% of it is possibly another soda can, right? Whereas if you do it with a plastic bottle, how much of that plastic bottle is coming back as a plastic bottle, depending on how you recycle it. A lot of it may not come back as a plastic bottle. A lot of it may get lost in energy losses that are needed to recreate that plastic bottle. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's what we're talking about. This is another concept, cradle to grave. So a cradle to grave analysis is something you're seeing a lot in corporate environments now and in business. And that's basically the company's way of analyzing everything that they're producing, the products, their processes, to make sure that they're not having negative consequences that are going to come back and bite them or the environment later on. And so that sometimes has more of a negative effect or positive effect long-term, depending on how you use it. So here you can see the technique helps businesses easily recognize any environmental concerns and implications associated with their operations and interpreting the results to make more informed decisions. And again, this is the key term here, is decisions. So a brief history real quick. There's tons of history. I know we're not in a history class, but some of these things I just thought were really interesting. You might be interested in knowing about them. When you start talking about green stuff, this buzzword, green and all that stuff, really started to take heavy hold in the 70s. EPA was created. We had the first Earth Day. You guys celebrate Earth Day, or you're familiar with it, right? Apparently in the 70s, I found this the other day, Arab-Israel conflict caused a major oil crisis. I don't know how many guys were here in the 70s for that. I wasn't around in the 70s. I've only been able to read about it. So you could attribute more to this, like how difficult it was possibly to get gasoline and fill up your car, or how much they were rationing gas and stuff like that. I've seen this in a lot of history videos growing up. So, those type of things cause us to think differently about our environment, what's going on around us. So all of a sudden these home retrofits and solar installations started to become something that people were talking about. And this stuff goes on a roof, obviously, right? In the 80s, this is the end of the 70s, early 80s, states started adopting a model energy code. And how many of you guys are familiar with being able to look up our building codes in like an IRC or IBC book? Like all these things that we do in building, they have a method that they have to follow in code, right? So states, as this code was getting evolved, they started adopting energy codes specific to energy consumption. And in the 90s, all this stuff in the 80s, right after that happened, I guess started to die off. And in the 90s, there was a little bit of a renaissance, started to pick back up because of this ozone depletion, this big buzzword. I'm sure you guys have all talked about the ozone, right? And what everything's doing to our ozone. So that was a huge buzzword that kind of turned everything around as far as the thought process of green construction and green everything. And so in 93, there was this greening of the White House, where they actually did this huge undertaking project for capital. And they found that by doing this, which they spent a bunch of money in the process, but apparently they saved $300,000 a year in energy. Now, if this is their savings on their energy bill, can you imagine how much they're actually spending? That's incredible, right? Those are big numbers. And then they reduced their carbon footprint by 845 tons a year. I don't know exactly how you calculate that, but someone was able to quantify that. That's pretty cool. By greening the structure. Soon after that, we had things like the post office, the Pentagon, and the National Park Service. We're all like, well, if this makes sense, if we can do things in a more environmentally sustainable way and save money, save taxpayers money, who's not going to go for that? So in 94, the AIA, that's the American Institute of Architects, published the first environmental resource guide, which, really kind of gave something to follow. And then LEED, which we'll talk about later. You guys, anybody know what LEED is? Anybody heard LEED?
Green certification program.
Yeah. So LEED is an outfit that we use in the US, and I'll show you a bunch of them throughout the world that we now are using to incentivize green building. It's a certification. It's a program, not a program. It's an organization or outfit that will help us quantify how green a structure is based on their metrics. So whether you buy into those metrics or not is a whole different thing and a discussion for a different class. I'm sure Patrick to write a book on it. So we'll get back into that though. This should look familiar to you guys. So all these different roof shapes, right? You guys have looked at all these different shapes, right? So let's talk about these a little bit. I want to talk about sustainable perception. And what I mean by that, if you are trying to sell something as green, green has become like tangible money green in our society a lot too, right? We just talked about how the White House was able to say, well, if we do this renovation, we're possibly going to save $300,000 a year in electrical expenses, which they said they did, they claimed. So if that's the case, then persuading that something is green can help you guys as builders win your contracts, right? Or say that your product or your roof is better than someone else's. So these are all these different roof shapes, and some of these have advantages to them over others as far as green designs. In fact, a lot of them could be persuaded as greener. And so I want to talk about that real quick. A gable roof. Can anybody tell me in here why they think if this roof was in here, why this might be greener than some of the others? Or why you might be able to persuade or argue that it's a little bit greener, more sustainable? Remember, I'm using the word sustainable when I say green.
Install solar panels.
Yeah, if it's at an ideal angle and you can put your panels on there flat, and easily put panels on, right? It's got to be facing maybe the right way, maybe southern exposure. Totally. What about a gambrel roof? A little bit harder one, maybe. Maybe I could convince somebody that's really worried about deforestation and taking old growth trees down that this is going to require less lumber because I need shorter sticks in order to create the same run from the top of your wall to the ridge, right? I can break those up and now you have more space inside as well. So I don't need old growth material. Farms used to use this extensively because of that very reason. They could recycle a lot of the old lumber and have room for hay in the top of the barn. Kind of a good advantage to this design. Let's take a look at the shed roof, right? It's kind of looking at the same exact qualities to it, right? The other advantage of a shed roof is possibly a garden roof, right? If you want to put a living roof on there, this is much easier to possibly put a garden roof on. If you have a really steep pitch roof, that's going to be really difficult. You got to look at your water runoff and the strength of it, but that's a good advantage. Flat roof might also give you that same type of advantage. So different roofs and different shapes in different scenarios could be proposed, argued that they're greener than others for different reasons. And that's kind of the issue with this whole green movement that we're in, right? It's still trying to find its way. What's our true underlying reason for this? Is it because we're doing it for the profit? Are we doing it for the environmental reasons? Are we doing it for both? A lot of this stuff can be argued in a lot of different ways, and it constantly is, and it's changing. I remember when a lot of these products came out in the market like OSB. I had a really hard time converting to using this stuff. I still like to use plywood sometimes because in some situations, I could argue that this really isn't a green product or as green. And in a lot of other ways, this is a lot greener. So we'll talk about that. This is a roof design that I didn't see in your text. So this is a butterfly roof, and this is becoming very common. By the way, if you guys want to know these, I put on a lot of these things, if it's in your textbook on the bottom of these slides, kind of where this is located. So in the Modern Carpentry book on page 747, they talk a little bit about this, but water collection. The butterfly design is great for collecting water. This is actually a picture from Nepal. So when I was in Nepal, the place that I stayed in for 2 weeks was a very interesting house. It was all concrete, and this was our water source. There was no city water hookup. There was nothing else. This was it. This was it. And they had a little piece of PVC that came off the roof that helped collect anything from the roof, and the rest of it, we went about 2 miles down the road to the only like spigot or faucet. We would fill a 5-gallon bucket. If you could carry 2 of them, you would fill 2 of them, and you'd walk it back and you'd fill this container. And from here, we cooked, washed, cleaned, everything. It was a very interesting thing. The value of water is so essential, and we don't think about it, but we really need to start thinking about it more in our built environment and in our construction. And roofs are a great way of doing that. I'm going to show you guys some structures later tonight that are built around the water collection that totally change the design of these structures. Yeah.
Do you think it's still viable in our climate with our amount of rain to invest in a rain tank system?
Yes.
Even though.
I will show you an example of one that gets less rain than we do.
Really? Yeah, because even in the last year, we only got 1 rain.
This has been an exceptional year. That's true. But if you can say on average, so we're going to talk about earthships later in Taos, New Mexico, northern New Mexico. They don't get much rain. They get between 6 and 8 inches a year. And their structures are built around their water collection. And the few years where they don't get that amount of rain, they can truck water in, which is still cheaper than the alternative of being hooked up to the grid and having all this infrastructure. But for the most part, they're able to collect enough water because of the size of the roof. Their house is built based on their water needs, which is a totally different way of thinking. It's building with the environment instead of, trying to get the environment to work for you. It's been here longer. It doesn't make sense. So I want to talk about typical construction, just so we're all on the same page. You guys work on that structure out there that I saw, right? So you guys are familiar with all these common terms, different types of rafters and stuff like that. We're going to look at some of these components and talk about what makes sense and what doesn't. This is something I used to travel with, which I just thought was kind of cool. I don't know if you guys got a chance to actually talk about the different blocking options that are out there and ways that this can be advantageous to you or not. There's a guy named Larry Hahn who unfortunately is not around anymore, but he used to look.
We looked at his.
You guys watch his videos?
Video, yeah.
Cool. So the guy that says 2 before. Remember watching that guy? That's what my students always remember. Oh yeah, the 2 before guy. So can you imagine that guy swinging hammer and sinking those nails with 2 legs? That's amazing. So he teaches, this different system of putting in your blocking at an angle like this. You don't have to cut it, so it's efficient versus cutting in these little pieces. And little ideas like this, and little tweaks can really change the structure and make it more efficient. When we talk about the roof specifically, and we start getting into insulation and sealing the envelope of the house, you got to talk about how you're going to get that insulation in there, and is it going to block the airflow that's coming in and out? And so having certain spaces to seal off can also be an issue, and that's a whole different thought process, which means we might start thinking about a truss package that has, a little heel to it, which is going to give us a space for the insulation to go on the end of the house, instead of having this really small little area right here, where if you put the roof surface over this, and then you try and insulate up to this, and you put a vent in the end, there's nowhere for the air to flow, right? But if you put a heel, basically another 2x4 under this, and then this goes on top of it, now you've got a surface that's this tall, your insulation can come in underneath it, and then you still have airflow above it for the vent. So it's just a different way of thinking about the whole build package. So we're going to build on this. This is the cool thing, OSB. I don't think this is actually going to play here. I have the video on the desktop there just in case. So this is really cool. It's a short, like 3-minute, I think, video on how OSB is made. But this is a really interesting product, and I want to take a closer look at this. because this is really taking over a ton of our products in the industry. So many things are utilizing OSB nowadays. So let's see. Videos down here. You guys see that back? Notice the size of those trees. How old do you think those trees are? They're all under a foot in diameter. Some of the bark removed off of them. What's that? I don't know exactly, but if we were to say they were on average 10 inches a piece, and they had 6 week growth rates, probably 6 years. Nowadays, a lot of background stuff, you only see 4 to 6 rings a week. For the old stuff, that's amazing. So all these chips are dropped in different orientations, right? So when it's compressed together, the oriented strand board, OSB, has more strength. See how thick it is going in the machine? Yeah. It's got glue that's sprayed in between all of it. It's going to get cut into basically a sheet, a rough, oversized sheet. And then it's going to get pressed together under extreme pressure to different thicknesses. So they're trimmed and bundled up. Shipped off. They constantly have to test and make sure that they meet their shear requirements and load requirements and all that type of stuff.
Where is this vacuum?
This particular factory, I'm not sure. I have to look that up. But I know we produce a lot of this in the South. Okay, I'll look it up for you later then. Yeah. Let's see. So if we were having this exact same conversation 10 years ago, I would have argued tooth and nail this is not a green product. And one of the reasons I would have argued it's not a green product is because one of the things we talked about when we started talking about cradle to cradle is the decisions we make have consequences later on. The majority of OSB that was produced actually had formaldehyde as its primary glue because it was competing with exterior grade plywood because it's designed for the roof. These things that you guys are working on. And if you, back then, if we didn't use the formaldehydes as the primary adhesive, it wouldn't hold up outside. In fact, if you soak this in water, it's going to swell up and turn into cardboard mush, right? They've gotten better nowadays. Science and technology has advanced a lot of it, but they're primarily not using, most manufacturers aren't using formaldehyde as their main binder anymore, which means it's not as harmful to us. So if this is in our indoor air quality, it's not as big of a deal. If something's going to harm you as an individual and put your health at risk, I don't care how long it's going to last or how well it's doing in a different process, I'd say it's not green. It's not really helping us, right? It's hurting us. So that's no longer the case. So this is actually a really cool product. As you guys can see, OSB allows us to take smaller trees that aren't necessarily grown for as long of a time we can harvest those trees and then use their chips very efficiently with less waste to make this product. So we're using a lot of it. And we make a lot of different products like this. So the LVLs, the OSB and the glue lams are all things that we can put into roofs as different products to possibly green them. Okay. Have you guys, I don't know if you guys have used one of these things. an engineered beam. They're kind of cool. There's this is a plywood layer on the top and bottom. It's an I shape. Any of you guys know why this has an I shape to it? Anybody know the advantage of that in construction? Check this out. I bet you guys can figure this out. We take this piece of foam. See my pencil lines on there, how they're evenly spaced apart? As good as I am able to draw. You know, I'm not a perfect artist. What happens when I bend this? Notice that the center section right here doesn't change. The distance between the lines in the middle doesn't change. But the bottom is getting compressed and the top is getting pulled apart. That's where all the stress is when you look at this from an engineering perspective, right? So we don't really have to worry about the web of this beam. We have to worry about the top and bottom. So the strength needs to be here, top and bottom, not the middle. So we can use this, cut into this with holes sometimes to run plumbing and electrical to a certain degree, and it's still perfectly strong because that's not where the stress is, that's neutral. The stress is the top and the bottom. So that's a really cool engineered product. Instead of using these big, long beams, can you imagine, let's say we're wanting to put joists, or, you know, this isn't a second story, let's say this is just a roof. We were putting, ceiling joists, or we were putting some kind of a beam across the whole top of this, or maybe it's kind of a flat roof or just an angled shed roof. A solid piece of wood, I don't know how wide this room is, but let's say it's 40 feet, 30 feet, something like that. Okay, so that would be a huge tree we'd have to make this out of, right? Not to mention it's probably going to be at least 14 inches tall, if not taller, for that span, so that they don't sag. Well, with this engineered product, we can make these things as long as we need, change the spacing of them, and, you know, depending on the size that we need, we can do that with small trees. We don't have to wait for a tree that's been growing for thousands of years to get a couple of pieces out of it and destroy all of our old growth.
You're gonna wait long for those pieces also.
What's that?
You're gonna wait for those pieces.
Yeah.
You go full lumber.
Well, do you think we're really gonna wait for them, or you think we're just gonna tear down the old forest?
We're gonna tear down the old forest first and we can find it.
Right? That's the problem. So as soon as you start tearing down the forest and you eliminate a lot of the resources we have that are old growth, especially in our Amazon forest, that has a huge factor on what we were talking about earlier, ozone layer. One of the things that we talk about when we're talking about the history with ozone layer in, I want to say it was, it's like 2006. We had an issue where we had like a record heat wave. I want to say it was like maybe 2009. And right after that, like 2010-ish, all of a sudden, a huge chunk of the rainforest died off. And then the consequences of the rainforest dying because of the heat wave that they weren't acclimated to was, scientists calculated this, I'm not sure again how they calculate the tonnage. They were saying something like 14 billion tons or something like that. I have the information for you guys later, of extra CO2 was released into the ozone, causing problems because it wasn't cleaned and absorbed by our rainforest. The rainforest is a huge filter to clean up the messes that we're making, right, in our industrial world. So all of these things have consequences. See if I can get this to go. So let's talk a little bit about roof venting, because besides these materials, besides the OSB, you know, glue lams, do you guys know what a glue lam is? Unfortunately, I don't have an example of that, but you take a bunch of pieces of wood, kind of like this wall example I have, and you glue them all together, you know, and you can make these long beams. I'm sure you guys have seen them in certain places architecturally. You can make huge, beautiful beams that are enormously strong. I mean, way stronger than you would have a standard piece of wood. So, and you can make them any size you want out of small pieces again. So that's a really cool technology. When we start talking about venting, this is actually a video I can play for you guys. This is a really good video. There's a really simple map, and we need to start talking about venting because even where I live, I don't know if most of you guys live really close to here. I'm assuming you guys probably live all within a half hour or so, but that would be my guess. I live down in Thousand Oaks, and my house was built in the 60s. And when my house was built in the 60s, there was absolutely zero insulation put in the house, and they didn't care about venting the roof. Someone came in later, and they slapped a garage onto the side of it, which was a total afterthought, because they didn't even have a garage. And they added some vents to it, but they didn't know how to really add vents. They just figured, oh, we'll just add air spaces, and this thing will figure itself out, right? They didn't think about how air moves, how convection works. So there was no science or thought process to that. And so when we start thinking about, you know, where our vents should go, you know, if we have vents at the very top, heat rises, right? You guys agree with that? Heat rises. And if we have vents at the very bottom, but not stuff down here, remember we were talking about that little display, vents coming in down here, this insulation, which is coming all the way to the end to really insulate the inside space. If you bring the vent up here, right above the insulation, then air can move from the bottom and move all the hot air to the very top and escape. That allows this indoor air quality of the attic to stay as close to the outside air temperature as possible. And that's really important, especially if you're running ducting up there. There's a whole new green technology or ideology with whether your ducting should be in conditioned space or unconditioned space. Whether you should be air conditioning that area, because if you're ducting, if you're trying to make your house 70 degrees really comfortable, I know some of you guys may like it really cold, let's say 65, right? And you want to take that air conditioner that's in your garage, run it up into your attic, and pipe it all the way across your house in an airspace, let's say, it's beautiful down here. You guys are lucky with this weather. But in Thousand Oaks today, it's like 91. During the middle of summer, I'm going to have 110-degree weather. No question this summer. We're definitely going to get there. I just don't know when. But that means my attic is probably going to be closer to like 120, 140. It's not unrealistic for my attic to get up to 140 degrees. I got a black, dark colored roof on my house right now. It's been on there for a long time. And that thing's just baking. It's not well vented. I'm redoing the whole roof this summer, by the way. So if you guys think you want to come and volunteer some time, I'll sell you some pizza and we'll swap for some food. No, I'm just kidding. But that whole thing's been not very well thought out. And so what we have is this cold air coming through a tube in 150-degree, let's just say I'm exaggerating, air temperature, right? And I want to keep it at like 60 degrees to my room. So I'm running through the hottest part of my house and then back down into the house. That just doesn't make sense, right? Someone's not designing or thinking well when they're doing this. So what we do is, it's now in the code too. So you guys got to think about this. Again, if you guys start to refer to your code books, we're looking at section, just for your own information, if you want to write this down and check it out. What is it? 1202.2.2. We start, or like basically 1202, you get into all the attic ventilation stuff. We start talking about calculating the airspace. And it's a really simple calculation. Don't think we're going to get into a math class here. If you can like add and divide, this is like super easy. A couple of things. It's like a 2-minute video. Super good. I'm not going to play the whole thing for you guys. But part of it is really.
Isn't the ducting insulated?
Yeah, but so
How does proper,
let's assume that ducting, let's say it's an 8-inch duct and the thing's 12 inch when it's all done. And it's fluffy pink stuff.
Right.
That's around it inside of a radiant barrier silver shiny stuff, right? How good do you think that insulation is maybe about that thick? Let's say the pink stuff on its best day is maybe an R5 on its best day. So maybe you got an R15 around that. You think that R15 is going to stop that from being super inefficient? And how well is that insulation taped off at all the connecting points? If you're putting a damper inside this flex tube, there's all these different factors, right? I'm not saying it's not better than not having it, because that's a good starting point, but you guys can do better, is what I'm saying.
Depends on how good your HVAC guy is, I guess.
Yeah, right. The overall design of everything might be able to be better. So we can maybe build an area of it that is conditioned, maybe not the whole attic, but maybe just a part of it. Or maybe we just vent the attic so that it's not as bad. We insulate the area that's right below between the ceiling, between the attic and the house. And we keep the air that's in the house as cool as possible so it's as efficient as we can. There's also diminishing returns on this stuff, which is a whole nother conversation we get into. I'll show you a slide at the very end of tonight. It talks about whether, if you can start saying, well, more insulation is better. Maybe you want to make your house like a Yeti cooler. I don't know how many guys have Yeti coolers, this is so expensive. Let's say more is better and you can afford it. So do you add 3 feet of insulation into your wall? You make your wall 4 inches thick, 5 inches thick, and eventually you're not gonna have any house left, right? Because your wall's so thick. At what point does it no longer make sense? And so you also have to factor that into your equation when you're trying to figure how sustainable do we need to go to really make sense? So
Get a mini split.
yeah, that's a totally another way to do it. You get super efficient. Like they make mini splits now that I think are like 23 SEER. And I have a buddy of mine who's having an air conditioning system. That's the seasonal energy efficiency rating of the unit, how efficient the unit works. I have a buddy that just got quoted for a really good unit. Average unit here in town, Santa Barbara, 14 SEER. I was like, have him give you a better one. So they quoted him a 16 SEER. I was like, you should really look at mini splits. He's like, I don't like the way those things look. I'm like, dude, you can get one that's like 20 SEER, no problem. Europe uses them all the time. So for those of you guys who don't know what the mini split is, you guys all know what that is? The little unit that goes on the wall has a condenser outside. There's no, the ductwork that you were talking about in the attic, it doesn't exist. It goes straight from the unit that's the blower. It just has the tube of Freon that goes out to the condenser outside. It can be way more efficient because you don't have all those losses. Anytime you have all these different things that have to change energy, transfer areas, if you get into electrical work, you learn a lot about energy losses. But that's a whole different, ballgame. You don't want to have all these inefficiencies.
They make them, you should tell your friend, they make them with vents, so it just looks like a normal ducted system.
Yeah.
Yeah. He might convert it.
Yeah, if you have different units, totally. All right, so this is only like, I don't know, it's 2 minutes and something.
Protect my roof. When it comes to attic ventilation, we may think it's just air. How can it impact my asphalt shingle roof? Well, proper attic ventilation is a balanced system of intake and exhaust vents that allow continuous airflow year-round, helping to reduce heat and moisture buildup. There are a variety of different system choices for providing critical intake and exhaust ventilation. Without adequate airflow, premature shingle deterioration and roofing system failure can occur. In the winter, moist, warm air created by appliances, heating, cooking, showering, and other activities in the living space can rise into the attic. Without a continuous flow of outside air, the water vapor cannot exit. Trapped water vapor and interior generated moisture cannot escape. This moisture can lead to...
How many of you guys have seen mold on wood in a house, right? Huge problem, health safety issue as well. So that's a whole nother concern here that we're not even talking about that they're getting into.
Wood rot, mold, mildew, and wet insulation. In addition, trapped warm air can condense on the underside of the cooler roof deck, resulting in further moisture issues. In colder climates, the attic space is often warmer than outside temperatures, causing snow on the roof to melt. This melted snow can trickle down to the gutter and eave area where it refreezes, creating an ice dam. This can cause leaking and costly damage to shingles, gutters, insulation, and the roof system. During summer, hot, humid air cannot escape, resulting in extreme temperatures in the attic, making...
So when you guys are looking at ice, I know we don't have that problem. You guys probably don't get snow here very often, right? Probably never. It's really easy to remember that whole concept. Condensation, just think of a cold glass of water. Right on the outside of that water, the air hits it, it slows down and turns into those little water pellets you see on the outside. That's the water changing in temperature. So when you have a hot house or a cold house on a roof, one side of the roof or the other, you're going to get the same kind of effect. You're going to get condensation build up, and if it's freezing outside, what happens to water, right? It turns into ice or snow, it's frozen. And then if it moves and it does that again, you have all kinds of other problems which could become dangerous again, right? You have an icicle fall on somebody or something.
Air conditioners work harder and increase energy costs. When the roofing system absorbs heat and combines with humidity-related moisture, rotting and possible roof failure may still occur. Remember, highly effective attic ventilation contains a properly balanced, placed, and unobstructed system with both intake and exhaust vents that allow continuous airflow. This helps preserve the durability and performance of your roofing system. If you're planning to install a new asphalt shingle roof, ask your roofing contractor to make sure your attic meets current code for ventilation. To learn more about attic ventilation.
Okay, so that's my question. What is current code? Anybody know what the code is for ventilation? Okay, I'm gonna tell you guys. All right, so. Advanced. So this is a really simple equation. If you guys want to write this down, you might be able to use this later. Help get you a side job, make some extra money, convince your client you're super smart because they don't get this stuff, then you can explain it to them. So the equation right here, you take the attic area, we could make up a fictitious house and do an example of this, but it's super easy. You just take the attic area. Let's say we're going for the 150. So the code, there's two different options in our code. And that is we can have a 1 to 150 or 1 to 300 ratio for net free area. And then when we're talking about net free area, we're talking about the little vents. If you go get a vent that you put on the roof or that goes on the side underneath the eave, like down in this area of the roof, there's gonna be a little number most likely stamped on there. And that's talking about the net free area of opening in that vent. But when we're looking at it on a vent, we're talking about inches squared, or square inches, right? When we do this calculation, most likely we're gonna be talking about feet. So that's the hardest part of this, is you just have to convert from feet to inches, which is really, really simple. It's not a big deal. So if we had an area that, I don't know, let's just take 1 foot, for example, because 1 foot would help create a good visual. As a woodworker, if any of you guys get into woodworking, you learn about board feet. And wood is sold in the board foot. So a 12 by 12 area, 1 inch thick, right? The board foot, you guys learned about that when you learned about lumber. And so 1 board foot is 144 inches, 12 times 12. So that's what you need to know when you're doing your conversion, is that 1 foot equals 144 square inches. 12 times 12 inches is the same as 1 foot. So if we take this whole equation, let's say we have a house that's, we'll make up some numbers real quick, just for fun. We'll do it really fast. Let's say you have a random house. It's a bird's eye view, a floor plan. How long is your house going to be? 15. He's got a short house. Okay, how wide is that house?
10 foot.
10 foot. Oh, he's got a shed.
Is it
Okay,
a tiny house?
he's definitely in a tiny house, right? So someone pull out a calculator. What's 10 times 15? This should be really easy math. You don't need it, guys. What's 10 times 15? 150. Okay. So what's 150 divided by 150?
1.
Okay, so that's 1. But what is that? Is that feet or inches? So this is feet squared, right? Or square feet. So this is going to be in feet, right? So we need to convert this. So if we have 144, this times 144, that's inches squared, will give you, that's really simple math, 144 inches needed, right? So if you have 144 inches needed, basically 1 square foot, or 144 inches squared, then you need that many vents, but you don't need that at the top and the bottom. You need to split that in half. So what that means is that, what's half of 144 roughly?
70.
What's that?
72.
72. Okay, so if you have, I'm going to draw a house roof here. Don't mind my artwork. I'll sign it for you later. 72 inches, 72 square inches. Keep this consistent, 8 inches squared, 8 inches squared. And then you need 72 inches squared up here. So if you have, basically with such a small house, a couple of small vents down at the top and down at the bottom, or up at the top and down at the bottom, that had half of this, basically, you can split it 50-50. If you can't split it perfectly even, you want more of your ventilation at the top. So let's say that the vents that you bought worked out to be 70, right? And then you had to have extra vents, a minimum of 74 at the top. Let's say you had 70, so they're 35 apiece. You would just have that extra one at the top. You can always have more than 50% vented at the top, because you want more draw from the top pulling up than you do at the bottom. Otherwise, things won't vent properly. Does that make sense? Yeah, cool. So the rule, how I meant to say, the other possibility is a 1 in 300. So this is for maximum airflow, the 1 in 150 rule, right? If I do my house, I want the maximum airflow if they're possible. I want to keep it as cool as I can. But let's say that for some reason you have a hard time getting that much venting. You don't like the look of it, or your client doesn't like the look of it. They don't really care. You could go down to this 1 in 300 rule if there are exceptions in the code. You are in climate zone 6, 7, and 8. You have 3 feet minimum at the highest point of the roof. So where the ridge is, you got to have at least 3 foot in there of clear space for air movement. You have to have 50% or more of the vents, like you said, at the top. And when you do this, you have to have a vapor barrier in the ceiling, between the ceiling and the insulation. So, you know, from that picture you guys saw before. So if this is the ceiling and this is your insulation, you got to have a vapor barrier put in here, because you're going to have, it's not as good airflow. You might have problems otherwise. Either way, that it's the same easy calculation. You're just doing.
Are all of those required or just one of those?
I'd have to read the language of the code again. I believe it was all of them, but that's the way I interpreted it. I don't know this. I have never seen an inspector specify this to me or talk to me about this.
Right.
I've only seen this in the code. I read this in the code the other day when I pulled it out for you guys. But these I've had people ask me about before. I believe you need multiple of those. Any questions on the way that's done, the venting? No, you guys are good there. Okay, so let's talk about roofing materials. Tons of roofing materials. Anybody know where this picture is?
Denmark,
Cool.
Copenhagen.
Yeah. So this is where my cousin lives. She lives in Denmark, which by the way has been a really cool place to live for COVID. And apparently now she's having a kid. And I was like, oh, you better start saving for that college fund. She's like, why? They pay for college for them. I was like, oh my goodness. I couldn't even like grok the concept being here in America. So what I want you guys to look at really closely, see if you can tell me like what kind of roofs are on these buildings. Any idea what kind of materials we're looking at? Yeah. So when you start looking at all their buildings, I've only seen 3 materials on the roofs in the downtown Copenhagen area, unless you get really far out of the city. They're always slate, they're clay, some kind of like clay tile or something like that, or you have copper sometimes because they're old structures and that's what they had to work with. And it's all still in good shape and it's been there longer than I've been alive, which is awesome, right? The longer something can last without using up our resources, the greener, more sustainable it is, right? By definition to a lot of people. So if you look at asphalt in your books on page 358, asphalt is a big topic because a lot of people use it. I'm not going to cover a ton of information on asphalt because of all of these other things that we're going to talk about, it's probably the least green, but it's not green. People can argue that it's green because it can be recycled or reused for certain things. You can take asphalt if it's properly recycled. You can, people say use it for paths. You can mulch it up and repack it and use it for like walkways and streets and all kinds of stuff like that. It's hard to reuse though. It's not like you're gonna melt it all down using a lot of energy and turn it into a brand new product that's viable to sell. You can reuse it or reclaim it in some way, but I don't know that I would necessarily consider that to be sustainable myself. You might have this brilliant idea though, that's like the great business problem solver of the future. There's a couple things about asphalt that I would want to share with you guys though. So coming from a sustainable tiny house background, when we're talking about that, I don't know anybody who's put asphalt roofs or shingle on their tiny house. There's a couple reasons. Anybody tell me why asphalt might be bad on a tiny house?
It weighs a ton.
What's that?
It weighs a lot.
The weight?
Yeah.
Okay. Not as heavy as like clay or tile, right? But yeah, it's definitely heavy. Why else?
It blows off.
Okay, you're gonna drive that sucker down the road, right? So you gotta have hurricane rated asphalt shingle in order to put that thing on a tiny house if you plan on moving that thing. That's definitely a good reason. A lot of people are really thinking about water collection. Remember that bucket from the fall? So would you guys want to drink your water if it came off of an asphalt shingle roof? Why?
There's the little rocks and all that.
You got all those little rocks on there, right? You've got all the asphalt that's got all these petrochemicals in there. There's little fibers and stuff that they make the papers out of that are underneath that stuff. A whole bunch of debris that's going to be in that water that now has to be filtered out, right? So you got to have pre-filters to your filters just to collect it. So asphalt may not be a really good alternative for that. How long does asphalt last?
20 years.
You know, a decent low grade, medium grade, 20 years. A really good asphalt shingle now, maybe you get a 50-year warranty out of it. Does it last that long? Who knows? Most people don't own the house that long to tell you. You know, we still haven't figured that out. If you read the fine print underneath all the manufacturer warranties, it says to the original owner, and then that warranty, they say lifetime warranty to the original owner up to 50 years. Well, that warranty is really, it's, what do you call that when it's not the full warranty, it's like, it's amortized. So based on the wear and tear. So if you've gotten 40 years out of it and it should have lasted 50, they're basically only going to give you the other 10% where when you claim the warranty, it's not really a 100% warranty, right? So it's prorated. Thank you. There you go. Thank you. So those are things you got to think about. Let's talk about the clay and the slate and clay roof second. So if you guys are looking in your books, you got 386, it talks about that. It shows you kind of the way it's put together. Let's get into concrete. We'll hold on that for a second. So with the clay roofs, you have a product that's made with very few actual ingredients. It's very natural and they're heavy, right? You got to build the house well enough to hold them up, but they'll last you a long time. How long do you think you're going to get out of a clay roof?
Depending on the clay, I mean, it could be a lifetime or it could be 50 years plus.
Yeah. Depends who's walking on it too, right?
Yeah.
So those factors, but you can get a lifetime out of a clay roof. So for something that could be ground up into its raw material and put back on the ground without a problem, or could be turned into another clay roof, that's a pretty sustainable product, something that's going to last you a lifetime if properly done. That's pretty cool. I would say that's green, right? Let's give it a green stamp. So what about the slate? You guys know where slate comes from? How long is that going to last you? You get a lifetime out of slate too. There's places in Italy that have had slate on those roofs for hundreds of years, like maybe 800 years. I think I was reading somewhere there was like an 800-year-old roof that's still functional without needing to be redone. I mean, that's amazing, right? That's cool. And then they basically, that's a natural product. So they go to a quarry and they crack that stuff down the fault line and they slice it up and you have this product made by Earth, right? It lasts a long time. Could you say it's sustainable? Is it an unlimited resource? I don't know. So that you could argue that there's only so much of it out there. We don't make it, right? It's made by nature. So after a while, you're not going to have it anymore. So I wouldn't say it's renewable. It might be green in some sense of the word, but it's not renewable. So, that might be a qualification for green someday. Let's look at concrete. So this is another picture of that house that I stayed at in Nepal. Any idea what this is made out of?
Block.
It's a concrete house. So it's CMU's, it's concrete block, and it's basically mudded over, right? You have not really a stucco finish on there, but a plaster finish on there. And the roof of it is a concrete slab. That's all it is. It's a concrete slab. And I'm not exactly sure how well it holds water. It's really green. So it's got a lot of efflorescence on it. They don't have any water inside the house. It's dry. I don't know if they actually went up there and sealed it with anything, because concrete, have you guys ever noticed when you put water on there, it can soak it up when it's not completely hydrated? It's hygroscopic, right? It's going to absorb all that stuff. So not the greatest roof, but how long do you think this house is going to stand there if they don't have earthquakes? A long time, right? They build like this because when they can afford it and they save up, they can pass this house down to generations, right? And then generation after generation will keep adding onto this house as their family will work this farm that they own. So, another way of doing it, I would say that's pretty sustainable. It's pretty cool. We now have a lot of different things in concrete. You guys heard of aircrete? We're starting to mix other things into our concrete because the concrete itself is really heavy. So you can take little styrofoam pellets or other things. You can whip the concrete to actually make air inside the concrete, make the whole concrete lighter so you need less of it. And concrete, you can get into a whole class on making concrete. It can be really harmful to the environment. Concrete, the production of concrete and the curing process of concrete creates a lot of ozone issues. There's fly ash and all kinds of things within concrete that can be problematic. So that's a whole thing that you can look up and study. But it lasts a really long time once you're done with it. So, you got to weigh those two things. What do you guys think this is? I made it really easy with the boat. I thought I made it easy with the boat.
Italy?
Yeah, it's in Italy. Venice, right? So this is Venice, and this is Florence. Do you guys see what materials on their roofs? Clay. Yeah, we got clay tile. We got a lot of that. And then up here in these domes, we got copper. Right? So these buildings have all been around longer than I've been alive, longer than probably all of us have been alive. And they're still standing. They're functional. They're working. So that's a testament to their sustainability, if you will. Does that make sense? Anybody know where this is? If you guys really study architecture, this window where you might give it away. That's Machu Picchu. This is actually in Machu Picchu. And so this is like a thatched roof, right? And this, I like this picture, and it's kind of hard to see here with the lighting. but this actually shows you the underside of it. When you see a thatched roof, when you're going around, if you guys ever get into traveling, like England or somewhere, it's like usually from the States, everyone goes to England first for me. It's like really easy. Everyone speaks the same language. It's not a hard change, right? So you don't see the underside of it. You just see some of the older structures, if they've had to repair the thatch, they just add on top of it, add on top of it, add on top of it. And you'll see thatched roofs that are like 5 feet thick or 7 feet. It's pretty amazing. And so I don't think this is original. They probably had to redo this, but I don't know. But I just wanted you guys to see this. That's a pretty simple, organic, sustainable structure. Can we regrow that pretty easily? The grass? Yeah, right. And it works. I don't know how well it works. Do you guys have any idea what the lifespan of this type of roof is? No? From what I read, I've heard that this is 30 to 50 years you can get out of a thatch roof. So that's pretty amazing. This is even cooler to me though. You guys know what kind of roof this is? This is in Japan, by the way.
Looks like moss or something.
This is actually a thatch roof as well. So it's a straw roof as well on a temple. And they have such precise, sharp instruments that they cut and shape this thing that they make like any shape they want. It's so cool. I tried to post the best detailed picture because this is why I travel, guys. I want to see the way things are made everywhere in the world. My mind was blown the first time I went to Europe, and I stayed in this crummy little apartment on Airbnb. And I walked in the room, I set my suitcase down on the bed, and the door closed behind me. I was like, how the heck did it do that? Is there a ghost in here? Is there wind? What the heck's going on? And I looked at the door hinge, and instead of the leaves of the door hinge being cut straight, they were cut at an angle. So when the door is opened, it goes up, and gravity pulls it down closed. I mean, so cool and easy, right? I've never seen that in the States. Let's see. All kinds of things you can learn from watching the way people build things and the way we as humans around the world have solved our problems. So let's talk about metal roofs a little bit. So these are some tiny houses that you guys may have seen before online if you've been looking at tiny houses. Some of these are really popular locally. These are all houses that I've helped personally with. This is Jay Schaefer, who created the tumbleweed tiny house, which is probably the iconic first tiny house that people look at. He also created this design. And when I was teaching workshops with him around the country, he had drawn this up. This was in his mind as a possible design. And he had it on his website for years. And I was like, where's this thing? He's like, oh, I photoshopped it. This guy is a master at Photoshop, okay? He can make anything look real. And so I was like, well, why don't we just build it? He hadn't had the money to do it. So my high school kids in my classes in Thousand Oaks, we built this thing. And we brought it up. This is actually at a fair up in Cotati, Northern California, the Santa Rosa area. And another guy locally to him finished it all out inside. We only did the outside shell of it. It turned out really cool, but you notice it has a metal roof to it. And for all those reasons we talked about, it's lightweight, good with the wind, good to collect water on. It'll last a long time. We don't need much of it, so we're not worried about the fact that metal could be a little bit more expensive. But you know, when everybody starts saying that, well, it's too expensive. Metal is expensive. So it's relative. If you're going to put 2 roofs on your house and you're going to own it for a long time, it's cheaper than 2 asphalt shingle roofs, isn't it? And it's going to last you longer. So it's really not expensive in the long run. So we got to start thinking differently, our consequences. When you go to Japan and you start studying architecture there, they have a totally different philosophy. Their community, you don't have a contractor who's going out there and doing design bid build. He doesn't just make a building and put it up for as little money as he possibly can and just turn around and sell it for profit and get out of it, not worrying about what it's going to do long term down the road. You know, maybe he's got to warranty it as a contractor for 5 years, 10 years, and that's all he's got it to last, right? He's like, if it'll last 10 years, it's good. I don't need to be any better than it. They don't think that way. They go to their community, they talk about the whole process, and then they figure out what is going to be best for the community. How is this thing going to be made? When it's done being used in 50 or 100 years and we tear it apart, are we going to be able to reuse these things? How is this going to affect our environment locally? They have to think about all that type of stuff. It's a totally different, responsible way of thinking that I really hope we start adapting more of those type of philosophies here in the States. It's really cool, actually, because I don't know, it's just, I would give Japan one word. When I finished traveling Japan, the word respect. That to me defines Japan. Respect for the community, respect for the next generation, all that type of stuff. So coming back to this, so there's 3 different designs here. Vina Lustato is probably our local tiny house builder that's pretty well known. She's not an architect, she's a designer. This is her office that I helped finish. So you guys might see that around in the paper all the time. This is another structure that actually when Lisa and I are working together at the BCOE, right? This was built out there in one of my workshops by a local guy who works down at Point Magoo. He's a retired military guy. And this was the roof he's put on his house. Anybody know what kind of metal roof this is? I know it's hard to see in these slides. Yeah, perfect. Nice, standing seam, right? So I have a close-up of a different house. This is from a different tiny house that I built, but this kind of shows you a good detail of how this goes together. This is not the typical standing seam. This is not pressed. His roof was actually crimped and pressed together at the seams. I don't know if you guys can see this bead, but this comes up, kind of has a like an outward bead to it and comes down. And then this panel comes over and there's a little lip right here that clicks onto it. So this particular roof just snaps together. Way easier, uses less tools, it's DIY friendly. This product comes from up in Northern California. And you can see the end detail here where this flashing, the drip edge comes over the end here. This is a really simple product. So labor-wise, this is very minimally intensive, right? Almost anybody with minimal training can install this roof, I would say. And there's no penetrations on top unless you create a penetration for a vent or something. So this is going to last you a really long time with minimal problems, right? Anybody know what material this is made out of? Probably like a zinc product. As far as metal roofs go, we know copper can last a long time. This zinc hasn't been around as long, so we really don't know what this is going to look like in 50 or 100 years because we haven't used it forever. But it's got all these new coatings on there. This is a powder coating, I think, on top of this particular product. So it'll be interesting to see how well it fares. But you know, if you can get the same kind of lifespan and close to it with copper, that's really awesome, right? That's very sustainable, very green. So this is another building technique / philosophy argument that you see in a lot of building science forums. The right way or the wrong way to do this, and I'm not saying there's one or the other. I just want you guys to think about this. Do you guys see what we're doing? It's different. So a lot of people like to take the metal roof and pick it up off of the substrate. So if you have metal and you don't want to set it down on top of your building felt, you don't want it heating up the surface underneath it, causing any problems, or you need to have more space. Let's say you're going to put in a big screw. You want more meat to put that screw into. People will put strips down. Can you see these strips right here? Right, the wood strips?
Yeah.
So they're using that, that's where they're putting their screws, right? What's going to happen if, let's say, you get a failure in the screw right here at the ridge? What's that? Well, let's say that the gasket on the top of that screw fails and you get water that just comes in there and starts to bead down. What's going to happen? Let's say it hits your felt paper, it goes into the screw, comes down through the piece of wood, hits the felt paper. Let's say the felt paper doesn't fail, it holds, but the water starts dripping down the roof. What happens? The wood's going to rot. Right? These wooden strips are probably going to start rotting out. Are you going to see it right away? It's going to be a while. So that first strip's going to rot out, and maybe this next strip's going to rot out, and then this strip's going to rot out. Maybe by then it's backed up so much that you start having a leak on the inside and you find it. But maybe not. Maybe if you got something like a SIPS roof, which we'll talk about later, you don't see it for a long time. Well, that could be a problem. And as a builder, you have those consequences. You got to think about that. There's other ways to do that. So I would say that's a bad idea. This guy in this picture, I don't know who did this, but this particular picture did something really cool. He ran the strips this way first, so the water can run all the way down underneath everything, and then come out or just damage the overhang or the eave area. And then all these other strips of the nailers running across. So you have the gap up top, plus you have an air gap, right? That's going to allow air, when it heats up and gets in there, if this is insulated properly, that air can flow up above this without moving into the indoor envelope and come out the ridge if it's ridge vented. That's kind of cool. If any of you guys follow this guy, Professor Foster and I were talking earlier about Matt Reisinger, this YouTuber that does a lot of these green energy efficient homes. He's got a house right now he's building in Texas. And on his house, what he did with these is he ran all the strips at 45 degrees everywhere on the house. So the water can hit a strip, come all the way down without having to work its way under something and rot it out. Plus you have a lot of air movement. So his idea is, you know, it's going to dry out. Most likely his climate, he's got a, you know, pretty hot, dry area. Yeah.
Let me ask the class, if they want to keep going or they want a little break.
Yeah.
This is about the time I usually ask them to need a break.
Yeah. What do you guys think?
Get some shake hand or whatever.
Sure, do a break, what, for me, yeah, but
Yeah, okay.
whatever everybody wants.
Yeah, how about maybe half past or so,
Okay, sounds good.
or whatever you need, but.
Yeah.
Around 2 minutes. I was looking through all my pictures trying to find this. The first time I went to England, I was going there to visit a friend of mine who's moving back there. She was working in the States for a while. And I went for Christmas. And so I was down in London, seeing the whole thing. I was like, I want to see the rest of the country for no reason. So I decided to stay an extra week. And her parents live up in London, England, which is like the northern part. And so I ended up driving up with her in a car. And on the way there, we saw all kinds of really cool places. And I was like constantly asking to stop and take pictures and stuff. She's probably gonna annoy me. I'm like, that's technically really cool. I gotta get this photo. And then I'm coming back down. I had no idea in Europe, the school bus, or not the buses, at Christmas, everything shuts down. Like they're really serious about the Christmas holiday. And like everything was closed. And it was freezing cold up there. I did not have, from Southern California, I did not have the jacket to be in northern England during that time of year. And the thing that saved me, I'm at this bus stop because I had to take a bus back down to southern London to get back on the plane from home. And there was this one thing open, it was McDonald's. And I go in there and I ordered everything that I could think of as warm and liquid to drink. I was like hot cocoa, hot coffee, this is all great, I need to warm up. And I was just waiting for this bus. And then I got on this bus and I was taking it back down and there was this one structure that had this like 7 foot tall, and maybe a little exaggerated, but not by much, like thatched roof. You could see the edge of it just so thick. And I was trying to get a good picture of it on the bus. And I know I have a shot of it somewhere. It's not great, but I have a shot. I was trying to find it for the slides. I couldn't quite locate it. But, yeah.
You know, India does a lot of thatch too.
Really?
Yeah, in the real small villages. Yeah, it's a really great art. That's the most sustainable roof. You know, when you talk about sustainability, you have to get into longevity because that's a factor of sustainability. But that bears more discussion than we're getting.
Yeah.
You know, it's like concrete foundations. Well, they last forever, but we don't need a concrete foundation. We can build all kinds of simpler foundations, and they're starting to do that now. And you know, a lot of cultures, they're cyclical. They don't believe in longevity forever. They believe in redoing things periodically, right?
The Japanese, I think, rebuild every
Japanese,
30
Oh, they
years,
do?
something like that.
they build their temples every 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
Oh, you're kidding.
From ground all the way through.
Have you been to the Sam Maloof Foundation? I don't know if you've ever been down there.
Oh.
You remember the floor in the Maloof place? His floor is actually just brick, clay brick put together on the floor. And it's perfectly good floor.
Or how about hardened earth floors?
Yeah.
You know,
Grammar.
people use cow's blood and things and manure to make them hard and right.
Yeah.
And
I love
that stuff
that.
will go forever.
Yeah.
And same thing with straw bale, and when they use plaster finishes. In Europe, they use plaster finishes. And the weather does eat away at them slowly. So every few years, and it's usually a communal effort. And in Africa too, everybody just goes and takes a person's house and
Plasters it?
Yeah.
and that'll last forever because people are putting energy into it constantly. But in this country, we want to do something and have it last forever and not touch it.
Well, and I think that's the other problem too, right? I just had my neighbor, she moved down at the condo and she's like, oh, we don't have to pay the HOA dues. I'm like, yeah, but you're responsible for the roof, you're responsible for all those other
Right.
things. And do most people take and put that money away like you do
Yeah.
with an HOA, with your
Yeah.
reserves, to be able, no. And then you have these places that just end up being a ghetto because
Right. Because
they don't.
Yeah. You know, it's kind of, I live in an association too, and we have really low dues relative. It's still a hassle, and when you're tired, it's something you have to think about. But it sure gives you a lot though, and it guarantees the visual quality of the neighborhood, which is
Yeah.
really great.
Yeah.
So there's no way that's gonna degrade because everyone's paying dues to keep it up.
Yeah.
So,
That's
yeah.
it. Why do they rebuild those temples every 25 to 30 years?
It's a ritual thing. It's part of the religion.
Oh.
Yeah.
So obviously you did a lot of traveling too.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That's what teachers do, right?
It's to be teachers, if you have your summers and holidays, it's a bomb.
It works out perfect, you know? Because it does help to see things, like for building, this is perfect, you know, to see things around the world.
Yeah.
Depends on where you want to travel to. We really love a little time in October. If you're going back to Europe,
Yeah.
so I have the best weather.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I mean, India, I've been to India a lot. They've always done a lot of ferrocement, they call it concrete, which has problems in humid climate, it'll get mildew. So there's that problem, but they've come up with there's a place called Oroville, it's an international community in the south, in Chennai. And they've come up with some designs that are the best, I think, current home designs in the world.
Really?
Yeah. And they've got French architects kind of were the first ones to live in the community that were designers. And they're mixing Hindu and Buddhist designs with Western designs. Man, nice looking stuff. I show
Wow.
slideshows of it. You can just go on the internet.
Where is this?
Auroville, Auroville. And if you just look at images for Auroville, they just do hundreds of pictures of buildings.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really great.
You know what I really like? I found this while I was doing all that research looking for different things. And I found the historical architectural society. And it doesn't cost, I mean, it's like super cheap. Their webinars are like $5. And they actually have tours around the world that has to do with architecture. Obviously, they'll stop during the pandemic.
Yeah.
But I've watched a couple of webinars that they had, and I can't remember the name of it, but since you've gone to India so much, you might remember. This woman from the States went there and found these, it was typically wealthy people that built these, they held the water. They were beautiful, all the arches and the columns and everything. I'm trying to remember the
Were they
name.
dams or are they
They're-
structures?
They're structures, but they're underground, and they would collect all the water. And it had these stairs,
Oh,
and you
yeah.
Google it, they had these stairs that would go back and forth, so depending on where
Yeah.
the water was, how it, low or high it was, would depend on where you went, and they would go down there to get the water, for
Right.
drinking and bathing and everything else. Well, and I guess it was the wealthy people would build these kind of as a kind of a monument to themselves. And this woman started going and searching for all of these. And she was saying how people that even lived there, that it would be like around the back of their place, and some people didn't even notice they were there because they stopped using them. And at one point, they just started throwing garbage in them. And she was like, oh my God, how could they do that? Why would they be throwing, garbage in them? She's like, well, you look, they don't have anywhere to put garbage. So there was this great big hole.
Therefore, the government doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
That's your answer.
But let me see if I can find it, I'll see if I can find it and I'll send it to you guys. The book, the photography she did was just with her phone.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. I mean, really just beautiful, beautiful facilities.
So let's go till 8 and see how they are,
Okay,
how the students are.
okay,
And if they want to go more and you want to go more, that's fine. We'll do it.
cool. I think it's probably right about time I'd be concluding anyway,
Okay.
without the insulation stuff.
Yeah, so forget the installation.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is good though.
I like how it rules for one thing to go another one.
Did anybody make it to In-N-Out Burger?
Is there an In-N-Out burger around here?
You're across the street?
Oh. God, that one in Ventura, they have like a double lane. Wrapped around
That's what
that
they
thing.
need here.
When did you visit Japan?
Yeah.
When did you go there?
About 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago.
Nice.
Yeah. It's the only place I couldn't read any of the signs or speak to anybody because a lot of people don't speak English.
Where did you go?
So I went to a few different places. I don't remember the exact name of the cities, but I started in Tokyo, obviously. Everybody kind of flies in Tokyo. And then I went to an area far south. I was with a friend of mine who wanted to travel somewhere. There's actually a tiny house built in Japan. And so we went to go visit him wherever the meeting place was. She did all the translating and took care of all that stuff. I was totally not thinking about it. I was just like looking googly eyes on the architecture, you know?
Sure.
And then we ended up, I was like, well, we're already here. You know, as an American, I would love to see like a sumo wrestling match or something. So we took a train to this bull train. It was really cool. Super fast train to the north side of the island and or Japan. And we ended up seeing the sumo match. It was like the first day of the season. So I was like, I got really lucky the day before I had to go back.
Whoa.
So that was really fun.
That's exciting.
Yeah,
I'll try to go next year.
that's going to be a really cool trip for you.
Yeah, I hope
Do
so.
you speak any of the language?
No, I don't. But,
Sounds like you better
If
learn.
you can find a friend who speaks, then it would be
yeah.
way easier.
My girlfriend wants to go on this pilgrimage trip in northern Japan. It's like called the Roto Trail, and you go to these. You hike for I think 10 days, and you stop at these tea houses, and yeah,
That sounds really cool.
yeah, it's-
Did you go on that?
No, I'm thinking about.
I'm thinking about it too.
Oh, really?
Why?
Yeah, we're
It's in
thinking
the
about.
it's kind of in the, below Kyoto and between Fuji and Kyoto.
Yeah,
And they have all these medieval houses and you trek the whole thing. and-
yeah, we're thinking about going next year.
Yeah, we're thinking about that too.
Yeah, it seems really cool.
Yeah, it does look great.
They have a carpentry museum there. I don't know if you're interested in that, but they like shows you the evolution of all the hand tools and how they make all their joinery.
Oh yeah,
Something
the
really cool too.
joinery
You want to check that out?
is amazing. The
Yeah.
best in the world.
Then I would look into that so you can stop there.
Cool.
That was a key thing for me. Are we waiting for people still? I think we still got 2 people out.
Yeah, give them a couple more minutes.
Yeah. I just, I brought a couple things if you guys are interested in seeing these things that I picked up. This is a tool that I picked up online, Back Tool International. It's a really cool like pry bar thing. And it's got a nail holding end on it. So you can put a nail back in under a shingle and hit the hammer up here so you don't damage your asphalt shingle. Kind of a cool little tool if you guys are interested in checking this thing out. You're welcome to come up later and hold on to it. I also brought these things so you guys can check them out. I wore these for like maybe 10 or so years, these knee pads that really just kind of ended up running ankle all the time. The elastic never works right. And then I picked these things up, which are super cool. This thing just, the Velcros around your calf, but then it rests literally on top of your shoe, so they never slide down. They're always where you want them. They have a cover that you can replace on here to keep them from wearing out if you're on like a rough surface all the time. I typically, when I'm wearing them, I'm doing indoor trim work, so I want to have a smooth surface to not scratch a floor. They have these rough pads if you're working outside, and then they have like tool holders on the side. So another really cool product, I found these online. These are called Brads, like Brad, B-R-A-D, with a Z on the end. So Brad's knee pads. Some cool products that are coming out for construction. If you guys have been doing this for a while, protect your body. You'll really appreciate it when you get older. And then I got this framing hammer here that's got a magnet on it for doing really fast nailing. You don't have to hold your hand down and smash your fingers all the time. Kind of a cool shingle hammer. You guys are welcome to come and play with this stuff later. All right, let's dig into the rest of this stuff. So green roofs or living roofs, right? Green's kind of ambiguous. It can mean a lot of different things. So a whole bunch of, it's a long conversation. I got a little video actually, I can show you this, but pros and cons. You know, you got to talk about pros and cons of green roofs because this is something that could be a really cool option, but it does have its benefits and disadvantages. So let's talk about benefits first, the positive. Glass half full type. So natural insulation, right? If you have all this earth on top of your roof, have you guys ever stuck your hands down in the dirt? Is it hot or cold down there? It's cool, right? So the earth is a nice insulator. It's really good at doing that. So this natural earth, a green roof, is going to be a really good insulator for the building. It's going to keep the heat out from up top. Climate comfort. So besides cooling, it's going to create a nice, comfortable climate on the inside, also with noise reduction. So sound's not going to travel through it very well. That's a huge benefit too if you're talking about commercial spaces, places where it's noisy. Produce. You know, obviously you can grow on a green roof, things that you're going to actually use vegetation that's usable. But that also has its downside to it. Have any of you guys ever worked a garden? Is it easy? It's a lot of work, right? You gotta tend to it and take care of the weeds, and you gotta water it all the time. I just bought 3 fruit trees, right? And now we have this heat wave. I planted them last week. So I'm out there every day in my backyard trying to make sure they don't die by soaking them, trying to get them to really take hold. They're work. I get up every morning and I have to walk my dog and water the trees. Like, those are my 2 first things I gotta get up and do in the morning. So you gotta take care of this root, right? That's the first couple of years you're trying to get it going. It's a lot of work. That's a factor, right? It reduces pollution though. So if you have a green roof, any type of vegetation, especially trees, is really going to help you with reducing your bad air quality issues, especially in a downtown city like LA. Have you guys ever noticed when you go from here to LA, the air is different? Right? It's, in my opinion, it's different in a bad way. My brother, my oldest brother, went to school at UCLA. No, USC. Sorry, I should have never said that. He would be really upset. I remember I was living up in Washington State at the time when I was in school, and I was living on an island up there in the San Juan called Lopez Island, and we were getting ready to move down here. He had just graduated from college, and so we were all going to move into a place together down here so he could get himself established in this new career. And he's into computers and all that type of stuff. So he comes up to the island to help us move down, and he's on the island where I'm like, we have green trees around us. It's beautiful. The air quality is so great. You can breathe in and just feel good, right? And he gets to the island and he's like, oh my God, I'm dying. He's sneezing, he's coughing. The hay, like the pollen was just killing him. He's from LA and he doesn't have any of that stuff. He has smog, right? And so we get to LA and I'm just like, oh my God, I can't breathe here. The air is horrible. He's like, oh, I'm home. It's just, but they have the thick smog. You can see it from a distance. And so having vegetation on roofs especially would help with that a lot. So there's a huge advantage there. Reduce stormwater runoff. That's another big problem. When we get these heavy rains, it's not raining as often anymore, it seems like, right? Maybe we're in a phase, I don't know. But when we do get rains, it seems like we get a lot of rain. And it hits us hard, and the ground's not soaking wet. So the water hits the top surface and it starts just pushing stuff down really hard. We get this runoff, and our storm drains end up getting overwhelmed, right? If you have all these surfaces, all these buildings that we have, tons of buildings, collecting all this water and holding onto it and using it for something good, we wouldn't have that problem. Right? So that's going to reduce the stormwater runoff. Heat island effect. Does anybody know what that is? Heat island effect? So in our urban areas, we have all this black road, right? And all these black surfaces. And we have these, for aesthetic reasons, for visual reasons, we have these dark black looking roofs with asphalt shingle in a lot of places. How many asphalt shingle roofs have you seen that are white? Not very many out here, right? Especially. So what we end up having is all these surfaces that are collecting all this heat, and it's warming up our area. And it takes a long time for things to cool off. So you get this heat island effect, and having this biodiversity on top of our roofs collects all that heat and uses it for good. We don't have that reflectivity at the end of the day. If you go right after, like right now, if you probably go up there and touch the asphalt in the parking lot, it's still probably warm. I bet it hasn't cooled off yet, right? But if you go out there and you go touch a tree, it's not going to be hot. By now, it's cool. Right? It's handling all that much better. So we don't want to have that heat late into the evening in urban environments. It's really bad. Creating biodiversity habitat. That's just basically making a place for the birds and bees and everything we need for our ecosystem, organic ecosystem to keep operating. We're giving them a place, right? We've gotten rid of all the trees to put these buildings here, right? We get rid of all the plants and things that bugs want to live in, put roads. And so by creating a place for them to also live and putting that back so that we can cohabitate is an important part of the process. And so that's a big perk. Then we have the cons. It's expensive. There's no doubt about it. If you're talking about an asphalt shingle roof versus a green roof like this, asphalt shingle is cheap. It's common. We can get it everywhere at Home Depot. This is going to take a lot of work. Like you're talking about the different layers of this type of roof, right? Yeah. And so there's a whole science to that. I have books that have like different ways of putting the layers together and talking about that. And so to build all that stuff up, to get the engineering or the design, and then to put it all in practice and to make sure the structure underneath it is designed so that it's strong enough and will hold it. That in itself is a whole different design challenge. So it's really expensive. It's time consumptive, it's laborious. Limited plant selection. If you're putting a roof together, there's some things that are really good on a roof and there's some things that aren't. you may be building a roof because you want to have a certain type of trees that you love. But those type of trees may have root systems that are not good to be on a roof, because roots find their ways into things. They just have their way of doing that to find water. And they might be working their way slowly through all those layers and into your roof system and creating penetrations. So you want things that aren't going to be that invasively harmful to the roof structure. So there's limitations here. You got to know how these plants are going to operate. Structure limitations. We talked about the structural stuff a little bit already, but that's definitely a limitation. I could not put a green roof on my house. It definitely wouldn't hold it. My roof is made with 2x4 rafters. It's old, right? That's all they needed. So we talked about the root damage a little bit, and then maintenance. So a green roof is going to take a lot of work, right? It's like any garden, going to take a lot of work. Let's see if this will work. No? Let me see if I can. I want to play. I have one more video. I think really shows up 2 minutes. And we'll get into 6.
Hey Daniel, are you gonna talk about cob at all?
I did, but we could. For a roof?
No, just building in general.
Yeah, I was trying to keep the things that apply to roofing since the roofing class.
I don't think you can use it on a roof.
I don't think so. Let's see, we were looking at. This one? No, it's going wrong.
You know, they're doing a lot of commercial green roofs, it seems, in California more than residential.
The one on SUCC's campus, West Campus, we can only plant succulents because there wasn't much soil. It was only like 6 inches or less.
There's that in Golden Gate Park, there's a museum, didn't work, it's got a green roof. Up in San Francisco. Pretty good size.
I don't have it. Okay. Let's get into 6. So the
On that.
and you guys know what SIP stands for?
It's in the book somewhere, I think, guys.
Yeah, it is in the book somewhere, like page 718. Structurally insulated panels. Okay, so these are a couple of different. I literally built SIPS houses out of these 2 products. They're totally different products, right? This is one, that house, the tiny house we looked at, that was for Vina Lustato. That's local. She's the designer in Ojai, California, technically. This is a remnant from her place when I put it together. And this SIPS is made with a couple different things. What's this outside plywood called? OSB, right? And then it's got this internal stuff here, this styrofoam. This is expanded polystyrene versus, so it's got little like beads that are expanded and pressed together, which has air in the middle of it. You can have other products in the middle of these things, like this stuff. So this is another product. I built this house, which has plywood on the outside. This is much older. So from a company that was still getting started, they were trying to figure out what was best and what wasn't. And I built, this was a Ohio project, I think I did about 10 years ago. And it's got pressure treated plywood here. This is actually a finished cedar faced plywood on the outside. He was going to use for a tiny house. He was trying to go lightweight for savings of weight, right? And then the way these panels clip together, you can kind of see it here. This is actually the owner of the house. He only put, looks like in this picture, he did a lot of the work. These guys actually were the guys working with me. And the only thing he did is he put 1 bead on these 2 panels. He didn't do anything else. So he had to take his glory shot so he could show everybody he worked on his house. This V groove here, this interlocking groove goes together, and there's a little, what do you call it, like a little metal bar that's going across here, and there's a hook inside this other panel. Actually, it's in this panel, and there's an Allen key. It's a big L-shaped Allen key that you stick in the panel, and it takes the hook from one panel, pulls it into this little hook on the other side, not hook with the bar. It grabs the bar and sucks itself in. So it takes the 2 panels and pulls them tight. So there's no air gap. You have this spray foam that's completely sealing it off, and then this overlapping, like opposite face joint that kind of connects it. So I'll pass it around so you guys can see these things.
Is that polyisocyanurate?
Oh yeah, polyisocyanurate, polyiso. So this is what I want to talk about with these 2 things. The polyiso is advantageous in that they can spray both of these into these products. Most likely this manufacturer had the foam boards and they glued the plywood onto the boards pre-cut because it's easier to do it that way. This stuff, like you guys have probably seen the Great Stuff foam spray cans, they probably built this cavity and then sprayed into the cavity this polyiso because it's easy to do with this stuff. The advantages and disadvantages, the things you gotta talk about. You guys want to see these things? I can pass them around.
Sure.
So the advantages and disadvantages you really run into is when we start talking about decisions and consequences. So when you start having your expanded polystyrene, that's this stuff, versus the polyiso, this stuff, the air gaps between this has air in it, right? They press these little beads together where they have air. This, the air gaps in between this stuff can, not always, have a lot of HCFCs, which are very toxic to the ozone. There's a lot of statistics out there on stuff, but the newer polyiso stuff is actually considered to be really green. So I guess they're starting to make it with air and no longer putting the HCFCs in there. But the reason that it's bad, the HCFCs actually have a higher, it gives us a better R value than the air itself, right? Because insulation is basically just trapping air in something. So the better you can trap air, usually the better insulated you have. With a few exceptions, we've got some really cool products. Now I got some stuff from a friend of mine who works for NASA. It has these like space age installations. This stuff is like 6 times better than the best stuff you can buy for building. It's pretty amazing. But the HCFCs actually over time, when this is hit with sun, if this gets heated, will escape. They come out. And so it off gases. You're not going to have off gassing issues with this. So let's say we'll make up some numbers that this starts out as an R5 and this starts out as an R8. But if you want to have more insulation, you're going to go for the R8 stuff because it looks cool on your numbers and it helps you get the better rating. However, if in 5 years, let's say, if this is in the roof, if this is continually off gassing and you're losing that R value, this might settle when it's done off gassing and it's stable. Maybe this settles at an R6. Well, that might still be better than an R5. So it's still a better product, but maybe not. You know, you're definitely, if it were to settle at the same R value, is it worth it? I don't know. You got to ask yourself the question. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other reasons to choose one of these things. Like, you know, is it going to attract bugs? Bugs like some of these more than they like others. Is it going to have the radiant barrier that I want? Is it open cell versus closed cell? Like, there's a whole bunch of these discussions. Are you going to have, that's for the vapor. Remember, we were talking about vapor with venting. If you're taking a shower and all that vapor is going up into your attic, it gets stuck in there. You know, I've got a buddy of mine who used to use a foam board to cover his jacuzzi because he wanted to keep it, you know, nice temperature all the time. And I went to open his cover one day, which was just this big foam panel, and it was soaked. I mean, the thing felt like it weighed 300 pounds because the heat and steam had just worked its way into all the gaps. There was definitely no air in that panel. It was just water, like it was soaked like a sponge. So it wasn't really doing its job. It was worthless, basically. There's no R value to it. You might as well have had a piece of plywood on there. So those are some big, you know, pros and cons you guys are thinking about, especially when you start looking at SIPs. So let's get back to SIPs specifically. So a lot of guys love SIPs, especially if you're in the sustainable green world. There's some huge advantages to SIPs. Like, it's pretty much built and assembled off-site, and then you bring it on-site and you can put it together really quickly. It's like a puzzle piece that's already been figured out, and you're just literally putting these huge pieces together. So like when you frame something, you get that satisfaction, throwing something together really fast and seeing it take shape. You get that with SIPs. That's really cool. You also have these big wall panels that have very little wood between the front and back layer, the inside and outside. We call that thermal bridging. You have something of low R value, like think of a piece of metal, right? Usually if a metal is cold on one side, it's cold on the other because the energy transfers through it really quickly. Whereas if you did that with a piece of styrofoam, I could torch this side of the foam and I'd still hold on to this corner. The heat's not going to transfer through, right? So I don't have those, that's thermal bridging. You don't want to have a product in your wall that's going to bridge that outside temperature to the inside and vice versa if you're air conditioning. So we try not to have thermal bridging on our walls, and SIPS panels does a good job with that because there's very few 2x4s. I can have, in this panel, when I buy this is the electrical chase where it has 3 of these in the wall and predetermined spots you can cut into. But in a 4x8 sheet of this stuff, which they can actually make this the size of a full wall for a tiny house. Pretty cool. Like you can get 1 sheet is the whole thing. But I will only have 2x4s maybe every 4 feet instead of every 16 on center, right? So there's going to be a lot less thermal bridging of 2x4s. Do you guys know what the R value of wood is? Like Douglas fir, very low. Maybe you get a 1 or 2 R out of wood. Depends on its density, right? Depends on on how big the gaps are in between. We'll take a look at that. But like this here, I have this piece of framing lumber here. In an inch of this material, you can see there's not very many growth rings. Whereas if I wish I had a piece of really old lumber, if you look at a piece of old lumber, like actually some of these are much older. You can see that there's in these growth rings, the annual rings of the tree, there's probably like 10 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 11, 12. So there's like 12 an inch and a half here versus an inch and a half here. We've got maybe 6. So this is much more slow, old growth type lumber than this particular tree was. But in an old piece, when you get some really nice old fir, you can have 20 growth rings in an inch. And that's much stronger material. But it's also much denser. So when you look at these values online, you're like, oh, my framing lumber is this. That's not 100% accurate. So you should know that. It's an average, yeah.
Do you know the cost of that build? Because aren't SIPs kind of expensive?
Ooh, yeah, actually, well, and back then, so that was probably close to 10 years ago. I don't recall. I think that his SIPs package back then was close to 15 grand for just the tiny house. And that was just buying it dropped onto the curb from a local SIPs manufacturer. He just happened to be somewhere where there was a local manufacturer. A lot of times you're having it shipped from a different part of the country because there aren't as many. I mean, there's actually now there's a lot more. Yeah.
If you go on, there's a bunch of YouTube comparisons of SIP versus standard building. And I mean, you can believe all these guys, usually it's by someone who's touting one or the other. But they say they're getting closer to comparable. But then if you add the energy you're going to save, the cost of that energy, then the SIPs, hands down. Which brings up the point of whether this climate here is worthwhile to do it. And the payback's going to be a lot longer in a place like Santa Barbara because we're not using that much energy and losing that much energy to really need a SIP panel. So
yeah. Yeah, the other thing too, when they build these things, they typically design these things. SIPs were designed to be on a slab. This I think started in a passive house design in Germany, where it really started, and we're starting slowly adopting it. This structure here is put on a trailer. When a trailer goes down the road, you ever notice how those big long trailers, those big truck trailers, they have this big arc to them that camber, right? They're designed to flex under load going down the road. These panels are not designed to do that. So for a tiny house, in my personal opinion, this is a really bad idea because we had to cut out basically the bottom of every one of these panels, reshape them to fit the camber of the trailer because we couldn't flex the trailer while we're building flat. That's just not going to happen, right? And then he said he's not going to move this thing, and if he does, it's a few miles in town, whatever. I don't know. He wrote a liability release, obviously, but so there's a whole bunch of issues with this stuff as far as that goes. But if it's on the ground, then you get into some other issues. Let's say you're building a tiny house shed that you're putting on a foundation, and you're trying to avoid that problem. Well, here's my other question for you. If you've got a perfectly airtight house, and I mean it's sealed perfectly airtight, your blower door test is as good as anything could ever possibly get. What does that mean? That means there's no air exchange from inside to outside, right? So we have to add air exchangers, like a little Lunos fan or something like that. Would you want to be in a 100 square foot house that's sealed perfectly tight with no fresh air coming in or out and no mechanical air change? Let's say your Lunos dies in the middle of the night and you're in something the size of a coffin. You're going to run out of oxygen, right? So I know I'm giving a really extreme example, but you got to think about these things. This process was designed for a huge house in Germany where they could heat it with a candle. And that's the cool thing about it. It's because it's realistic. You can heat a house with a candle or some very small amount of heat when it's sealed that well. And you've got heat exchangers and air exchangers and all kinds of stuff like that. The technology gets pretty cool. In fact, if you remember in the tiny houses I showed you earlier with the red roof, just from being in that house, Doug, the guy who owns the house, says he's perfectly warm with him, never has to heat it because his body is enough heat because his house is literally insulated like a cooler. That's pretty awesome, right? Any questions about SIPs? You can get into a whole scientific debate and discussion about these things. They're really cool. They have a lot of advantages. You can make them in any size panels. When you're starting to use this stuff instead of plywood, we're limited on how big a piece of plywood can be. But when you start using OSB panels, and you can make a SIPs panel that's 20 by 10, as big as you can get it on a truck. If you can truck it down the road, you'll comfortably be able to make it that size. So there's some really cool things that are coming out of this, and I think this technology is going to become more common. So you'll see this. People are making roofs out of it. When you're using roofs, you have to use big lag screws to put all this stuff together. I mean, I was using screws that are probably 12 inches long. to tie all these panels together. And you'll notice that the ridge right here, this is an LVL. It's completely laminated, looks like the OSB, but it's a beam going all the way across.
There's one over there.
Right? Yeah, you guys have a big one right here. So this how it's actually compressed board. So you can actually still make these out of complete like chipboard too, as opposed to just like plywood. Let's see. Let's talk a little bit about solar exposure. So when we get into house designs, we're talking green construction. You got to factor in the environment. You got to factor in, and one of the biggest things we're going to be working with the environment is the sun. It's here every day, hopefully. Right? Otherwise we got problems. So you got to learn a little bit about the sun and pay attention to what it's doing, and maybe change the position of your house a little bit so you can work with the sun. You guys want solar panels. Which direction do you want that part of your roof facing? South, right? So, and the sun is going to come in different angles at different times of year. So during the winter, when the sun's a little bit lower in the sky coming through, if you have a good overhang on the house, let's say, I know this doesn't look like a typical house, this is a cave and a hill, but you know, if there's a big gap coming down, the sun's still going to come in and maybe heat up the floor and the back wall of this cave. In the summer, when it's really hot, so in the winter you get some warmth out of it, it's all going to go into this dirt on top, and that's a good insulator, we said earlier. So maybe the cave's going to stay nice and cool in summer. Let's think about that for a second. So if we were to rethink our roof a little bit and tweak it like this to where, you know, this has radiant heat and all kinds of stuff in it. Let's just look at this part of it. So the sun can come and warm this floor. Let's say this floor was made of not a concrete material, but you know, some sort of masonry, earth, maybe rammed earth, something like that. Plaster, maybe it's stones or something that's got a lot of mass to it. That's potentially a large collector of energy. If the sun's going to hit it during the winter when it's low in the sky, that could warm up that floor. And then what did we say about that laptop outside? Right? It's slowly releasing that heat into the evening. So the house could do the same thing. Your floor could then naturally be heating the house in the evening when the sun's gone. That's kind of a cool concept. In the summer, if you have big eaves, you can completely block it out, right? And still have some solar south-facing exposure for solar panels. This type of roof design could still collect water, maybe not as easy to collect water off of if that's something you're really looking at all the different aspects of sustainability. But there's some really cool designs that have taken this to an extreme. And I want to look at those. We're not going to get into solar stuff today. So this is Earthships. Any of you guys heard of an Earthship? Yeah, what do you know about Earthships?
I think they're just like complete systems based around the house with integrated greenhouses and spaces for your food storage. That's temperature and humidity.
Yeah.
Maybe some sort of passive heating under the house.
Yeah, so they're homes that have been designed around all of these passive design concepts. The goal of this particular architect, and people usually either love Earthships or they hate them. You could think that the designer, the architect that created this concept, his name is Mike Reynolds. You could think that he's a total nut, or you could think that he's brilliant. People go either way. Some people love the Earthships and the concepts of them, but maybe they hate certain aspects of it. Like, so two things that Mike tries to do. He's trying to, one, be completely off grid. So you don't have to rely on any utility company. Well, this gets into a political nightmare sometimes because the government, you know, wants to collect the tax dollars, obviously, and we need money to sustain ourselves in the way that our society currently works. But if you can change the structure in the way we're doing that, the other thing that he's trying to do is he's trying to take as many materials out of the landfill and reuse them, repurpose them. So tires were a big issue. So we figured out a way to pound tires full of dirt and turn them into like 400-pound bricks and make the exterior of the house out of that. The part of it that's buried in the earth, basically. So you still have structure behind you. He takes bottles and he buries the bottles in the masonry walls or the rammed earth walls, depending on what he's using them for, just as air gaps. Because if you can reduce the amount of concrete, you said concrete has some carbon emission issues, then you need less of it. The home costs less money and the structure is still strong enough. So a whole bunch of things like that. This is a video. I definitely want to play a little bit of this for you guys. It's 8 o'clock now. Are you guys good to keep going or do you want to stop? You good? Okay.
Just want to announce that in addition to tents, we like to call it the Wavy House. Mike Reynolds, the owner inventor of Earthship Biotexture, he does like to name all of the homes. So welcome to the Wavy House. All right, so we're gonna start by just entering the drive-in, the garage, I guess. So this is a full two-car garage.
Okay.
And so we're gonna come on in.
You guys know what kind of roof that is? The
So
ceiling?
all of the earth ships, they're made with about 45% recycled material.
Those are
So
big guys,
you'll see a lot
big
of
logs.
bottles, cans, and car
They
tires,
have a lot of trees up there,
especially
so
if you
you
come
can
to
get-
Taos and see some mid-construction builds. But some of this bottle work is very tastefully done, and it kind of acts as almost like a stained glass window, but it's mostly filler for all the walls. So very easy building, and you don't have to purchase as many materials when you have something filling the inside of the wall.
Just throw a couple parties, you're good to go, right?
Yeah.
What's the bottle of choice? What does it seem to be?
So blue bottles are like gold.
Like the Luna wine or?
Yeah, so this is,
So just so you guys know real quick, those bottles aren't complete bottles going all the way through. If you look at both sides of the walls, you see the bottle. They're taking bottles and cutting the stem off of the top half and taking two bottoms and taping them together to make a uniform looking brick, is what they call it, the glass brick. Okay.
just want to announce that in
Oh, no.
addition to 10. So we're gonna come on in. Inside the
Just
wall.
throw a couple parties, you're good to go, right?
Yeah.
What's the bottle of choice? What does it seem to be?
So blue bottles are like gold.
Like the Luna wine or?
Yeah, so this is actually a very tasteful wall. This is all clear bottles here. But in different homes, all the homes are custom all over the world. So you'll see a lot of different colorful bottle walls. Blue is our favorite. Some of the liquor bottles and wine bottles are preference. Well, come on in. This is the main greenhouse hallway. We like to call it a buffer zone, especially during the winter time. This will hold a little more heat in here so that we're almost tricking the interior space into thinking that this temperature out here is the outside temperature. During the summertime, what we can do to cool this space off a tiny bit is pop some of these windows open.
I'm noticing overhead too, with the
Yeah, we've
ropes,
got the
yeah.
skylights popped right here. These are all gravity operated skylights. And
Fantastic.
so
Notice they're venting at the highest point.
this gets a lot of nice airflow coming in and out of the home. Airflow is obviously key. But when we come into the interior space of the home, you can actually feel quite a temperature shift in here.
Oh,
And
very noticeable, yeah.
yeah, very noticeable temperature shift. It's a lot cooler in this room. It is close to 90 outside right now. And it's probably, if I were to guess, about 68 to 71 degrees in here. But this home, because it is tapping into the cool earth temperature, this wall back here will stay about a constant 55 to 58 degrees. This is what we call our thermal mass temperature. And this temperature will stay pretty constant all year round. And so whether it's 100 or -30 outside, you've got a constant thermal mass wall, kind of similar to a cave temperature or a basement temperature.
Are those returns over there? What are those
These are
used for?
actually cooling tubes.
Cooling tubes, all
So
right.
we are in the newest global model.
What is behind that wall?
So that's the backside of the house, and they just literally burned dirt up against the backside of the house, all the way up to the roof line. So you literally have, you're about to see in this tube, about 20 feet of dirt behind the house. It's burned up against it and slowly tapers off back down the grade. So a lot of earth.
Yeah.
All of the global model earth ships, they have these cooling tubes.
Just taking advantage of the cool underground temperatures,
So
yeah.
you can see this goes all the way through the berm.
That's about a 20-foot tube at the bottom of that berm of dirt. It goes through, and you see all the ribs in that tube. I forget, you know the name of that structural tube? I forget what it's called. It has a specific name to it. But all the strips, the air is coming through there. The air quickly gets cooled by all that metal. Because remember, metal exchanges its temperature really quick. And by the time that air comes into the house and the top vents open on a hot day, and the air's trying to, the convection's moving, the air's pulling through, that air comes through. It feels like an air conditioner. It's amazing. It's really cool. I've actually stayed in this particular structure a couple times, and I helped finish out the closets when we were still building.
Of the house. So just like a a cave or a basement, we do have about 15 to 20 feet of compacted earth behind the house.
That much.
Or, yeah, or if you had a natural hillside on your property, you could build right into the hillside, and it will tap into that cool earth temperature, and that thermal mass temperature can store itself in the walls.
Yeah.
But this tube goes all the way through, a few tire courses up, because this is a tire wall. So compacted earth tire wall, that's earthquake proof, fireproof, no off gassing from the tires. This goes all the way through the berm, that big massive dirt behind the house, and it's open on the other side. So if you
Screened,
want-
I'd imagine,
Yeah,
right?
it's
Yeah.
screened in, so no little critters.
Rattlesnakes
can
or
get in here,
whatever.
Rattlesnakes,
Yeah.
we have a lot of those in this
Yeah.
area. But all of the air, now, if you have everything vented properly, this cooling tube exposed my windows to the greenhouse and also those skylights that we showed you.
Yeah.
This will act as a natural convection. And so the air will get pulled through and it'll cool down as it travels underground. And then all the warm air will get pushed out and up through the
Yeah, so as it
skylights.
naturally rises, you're pulling off the coolness.
Yeah, so it's almost like a geothermal energy, but no electricity, no moving
Yeah,
parts,
that's
it's all pretty natural.
This is in
And so
Taos,
this
yeah,
is
this
kind
is in the
of
airship community in
our
Taos,
natural
northern
form
Mexico.
of air conditioning.
Yeah, Mike Kohler, if you're familiar with Mike Kohler, the Mole Man, or Malcolm Wells, Rob Roy, they use similar practices or different variations of it. It's so simple, but it
Yeah,
works
it's
so
so
well.
simple, and you can feel the cool air coming through here. It feels like air conditioning, but it just gets more cool air in the house, pushing out the warm air, and obviously getting fresh air into the
Yeah,
house.
of course.
Because this wall is, you notice there's no windows on this wall, and it's because this is a complete tire structure, rammed earth tires coming all the way up. And so this is just
Those are the vigas we were talking
behind
about.
this wall for about 15 to 20 feet.
Now, up above, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Up above us, so these are some pretty serious raptors.
Yes, these are called vigas here in Taos, New Mexico, or just in the New Mexico area in general. This is a very traditional building style. So these vigas, I believe that they are made out of pine. They are sustainably harvested
looks
in
it,
the
yeah.
area. This is very traditional for a Taos kind of adobe looking home. And these walls, these are all adobe walls, which are made out of sand, straw, mud, and water. These ones have a light coat of paint over top of them, but you can see the flecks of straw in here. I wouldn't use any kind of paint. You don't want to use a latex paint. There's a specific type of paint that goes well with the mud. So if you're doing mud walls, earthen walls, make sure you know what you're putting over top of it. But
How much earth is up above us? Seeing as these raptors are just so huge.
well, this is very traditional roof. You've got your these vigas, obviously. We've got insulation above these planks, and then and you can head to the roof over at our
There's no dirt above this on the roof, by the way. It's only up against the back wall to where the roof stops. So just so you guys are clear.
educational facility. We won't go on this one, but you'll see a lot of metal pro paneling. So the roof is not underground. The metal pro paneling on the roof is because all of these homes, they collect all their own water from rain and snow. So all of these homes, they are completely off grid, doing water collection from rain and snow. Energy control, we don't have to heat or cool the house because of this thermal mass wall and the southern exposed windows. This is passive solar gain at its best right here. So we get just enough light and heat to make it so the home is about 65 to 75 degrees inside the home at any period during the year. So like I said earlier, whether it's 100 outside or -30, you'll have a constant temperature in here. But we also do energy collection from solar panels or windmills. We also use about 45% recycled materials in every single build. And my favorite component of the home is the gray water system. We recycle the water here. So say you guys, anybody was washing the dishes, taking a shower, doing the laundry. We do have laundry machines in our ships. That's all the first use for the water. When this water goes down the drain, it actually goes through a really light grease and particle filter before it hits all the planter beds.
I was wondering if it came out right here. I see there's a buffer zone of plants here as well.
There is, and this, if you peek in here, in the card, that will be a light grease and particle filter.
Oh, wow.
So inside there, we just have a really light pantyhose that can catch anything coming out. but some people like to turn that into a worm bin. We'll start it off as a very easy grease and particle filter, and if the homeowner wants to turn it into a worm bin, they can do that on their own. But it goes through a system like that before all the water hits all the planter beds in the home. So the plants, after you take a shower or take a drink of water or run the laundry, the plants get all the second use for the water, and then that gray water gets pumped to the toilet tank. So the toilet water is the third use for the same water in the home. And because the plants do such a nice job of filtering that water, you'll notice that it doesn't smell funny, it doesn't look funny. It looks like normal toilet water. And if your dog drinks out of it, it's not tasty.
So they have conventional toilets and septic tanks.
Yeah, so what she's basically going to show you is the last use. I'm just kind of speed this up a little bit. So this is a 12-volt solar refrigerator. It's super thick and insulated, and it actually just gets its power straight from the solar panels without having to convert back and forth because you don't want the losses in your energy. You can see the thickness of that refrigerator there. That's in the freezer. There is, we're going to get to the bathroom here. So there's a standard toilets and all the plumbing, and then what the water they use 4 times. The roof is a shed style roof. It's sloped in one direction. The water, not all of them actually, some of the new designs are starting to change the exposure so that they can practice in a colder climate. You want to change the angle so the sun's melting everything off of it. But in Taos, they typically don't have to worry about that. So the water all goes down the backside of the roof, and then they bury the berms, that hill of dirt. They bury these big cisterns, these big tanks where all the water's collected. From the water tanks, it then goes into being used. It's filtered really well, a bunch of filtration filters and different systems. And it's used in the sinks, like you said, all those first applications. It's used in the showers and the laundry machine. From there, it gets pushed into the garden. The garden then is this huge long, like as long as this classroom, as long as these houses. It goes underneath that, and the plants filter all that water out as it's going through. Eventually, the water that's not used gets used or moved down to the other side, where it's then reused again, filtered, and then it's used to flush the toilets. And then the toilets go out into the front yard, which has a septic leach field basically in it. So the water is, there's no water wasted. It's used for everything. And so they figure the size of these houses based on the annual rainfall. So if you say, I'm a family of 4, my family of 4 is going to need this much water. We get, let's say, 6 to 8 inches of rain a year. Let's err on the side of caution with 6. That's how much surface area I need to collect this much water. That's how big you're going to make the house, right? It's a totally different way of thinking. That's how the earthship is kind of designed backwards. And you can see, I mean, it looks like a typical, if you guys have ever traveled to the Southwest, it looks like a lot of the Southwest homes out there with a little bit of a different funky shape to it. They were talking about the vigas being flat. I don't know if you guys have ever been out there, but a lot of the viga roofs is really flat. And especially in places like Santa Fe, New Mexico, they really heavily restrict what you can do to a lot of these older structures. They're trying to maintain the old look, which you can argue really isn't the original old look. It's what all the people that are currently in the political positions feel like it should be. So I have friends that live out there. They call it the Adobe Disneyland. You're allowed to choose any one of the 8 shades of brown you want, and that's what you're allowed to put on the house. And the roofs are all flat. They all leak. They all need constant maintenance and repair. So you want to be a roofer, man, move to Santa Fe. You'll never be without work because the roofs, they leak just the way they maintain them. But these structures here kind of utilize a lot of these different green technologies that we've been talking about. They're kind of funky in some ways, but really cool in others. And there's tons of videos out there. So I'll let you guys kind of research those and look those up if you want, but they call them earthships. So I want to just touch on a couple really quick ideas for you guys. I don't want to go into detail of these things, but just let you know they're out there. LEED, we talked about that rating system. These are a lot of the common rating systems around the globe that have taken hold. There's different rating systems in different areas. So you have the United Kingdom, BREEAM, and then in the United States, we have LEED. There's all these other ones, Green Globes, a whole bunch of other ones. We have others in the United States too. And if you start studying these, some people really like the way that they've kind of are getting themselves into the building code and changing things. And some people will say that, you know, it's all about the money and there's different things about them. So I would say this is really, if you're interested in green stuff, it's a good thing to study and you can learn about it. Their rating system, basically the way this works is for different aspects of the building, they give you points and people try to get more points to get, like, let's say you're building a new school, like a school has a lot of money to build and they'll probably try and work with LEED and other people to try and get like a platinum or gold rating, which means they need so many points, and they get points by doing things like having a really efficient water system, or a really maybe electrical system with solar panels, or like the low flushing toilets. Maybe they just add a bike rack, and a bike rack could be worth 3 points, which is why I have friends that will say that, you know, the system's kind of a joke, but it's better than nothing. Like we got to start somewhere. So something cool that you want to check out. This is a video I have on LEED, but I'm gonna skip it. So when you start studying LEED and all that stuff, it does have purpose, and you guys are not going into construction so that you can just become philanthropists, right? You want to make money, make a living. You don't have money to just give away, probably, right? So I don't know, maybe you do, and this is just something you want to do. There's that guy out there that has that blog, Pete, Mr. Money Mustache, that apparently made his millions of dollars. I don't know if you guys have ever read that stuff. And then he went into construction after making enough money to retire for the rest of his life. So that was his idea of retirement, a hard labor job. But I mean, it's kind of cool. If you think about it, like some people just like being outside and building stuff. We all need a purpose in life, right? You gotta have something to do when you do it. But, so this stuff comes back to money, right? We're in this industry usually to make a living and to support ourselves, and also to improve the built environment around us. And so this is just a case study that I wanted to point out to you guys. It's tangible in that you could drive here. It's in the San Diego area, La Jolla. And 1990, this place was originally built. This company, Glenboro, that's how you pronounce this, acquired it in 2007. They decided when they acquired this place, it was kind of like run down and dump. It had a really old HVAC system. The electronics and everything weren't done. It was a traditional building built in America, like most buildings, to turn around and flip and sell, right? So they did it kind of inexpensively. Well, this company acquired it and found out, well, the bones of this place is great. It's good. There's no problem with it. But the technology in it is outdated. So they started talking to people within LEED, and they decided that they were going to try and make this the best thing they could possibly make it, which is LEED Platinum. They were going for the best rating they could. And so they went ahead and changed out. They figured out everything they would have to do in order to do that. They found out it wasn't as much as they thought, and it was affordable. And they probably did the calculations on it and realized the return on investment is going to be really worth it. So by turning this into a super efficient place, which is ideal because it's near the melting pot and the Hyatt Hotel and all kinds of stuff, for a working office space, they were able to just put on a cool roof. They were able to change out the HVAC system, go through all the electronics, change out all the light bulbs, low flow flushing toilets. They made it super energy efficient, 63% energy reduction from what it originally was. They saved over 1 million gallons of water a year for just this one building, right? And the changes, like the toilets, that's pretty awesome. And then they ended up selling. They sold it for 150 million. I have not found any information on what they bought it for, but I would guess that they probably bought it for less than half of that originally, because it was run down with 0 occupancy. And now this is one of the most desirable buildings in San Diego to have your business in, because it's green, it's trendy, it's a cool place to be. It's environmentally friendly. People want to support that type of stuff. So green is worth money, right? And so these decisions we make can be good in multiple avenues. It's not just about the planet. Sometimes that doesn't help you sell it, right? You got to have all these different components. Future trends. I got like 3 slides left. Sorry, are you guys okay with finishing up, or you going to stop? Okay, so future trends, just some things you want to pay attention to. Transparency, carbon accounting, net zero buildings. These are just like buzzwords that you may want to look into or think about. So transparency, there's a whole bunch of organizations that have come out because of all this green stuff to help us kind of see what's going on with our economy, with our materials, with the stuff. When you go buy a home nowadays, you want to know what kind of water source. Like, you don't want to have Michigan water, right? They got stuff in their water. You guys pay attention to the news. They got like bad things in their water. You want to know if there's toxic stuff in your walls, like is there formaldehyde in there? So carbon accounting. We now need to start paying attention to stuff. If the products that we're using create a lot of carbon emissions, that's not good. And if we can show that the stuff we're using is reducing that, people will support that, right? It's a selling point. Net zero buildings. I think this is where we're going. Net zero buildings means we're going to be building buildings that don't consume from the grid, they feed the grid. If your house produces as much consumables as you require, and like, let's say the electricity, let's say you need a certain amount of electricity. If it produces enough for your entire house, feeds the grid, so that at night when you need a little bit extra, you can use that back from the grid. By the time the year's over, your utility bill is still zero. Your house has not needed anything extra from outside, right? It's net zero. BIM, this is if you get really heavily into building and you guys decide to get into building management, you're gonna see this. This is coming. So this is already here, actually, I would say. BIM is building information modeling, and it's these programs that are basically taking all these big building projects, they're putting it into a software program. You guys have heard of AutoCAD, right? This is a 3D version of that that has all the different components, everything built and figured out ahead of time, so there's no problems. And it communicates with all the different contractors on the job. So the people that are buying this project at the top and the builders can communicate with everybody out here in the field all at the same time. If you guys have a problem, you go on your iPad, you put it in there, and you can instantly talk to everybody else, and they can solve the problems quick, and everything can be reworked. That's BIM. Life cycle assessment. We talked about this with materials. So basically looking at the life cycle, cradle to cradle, cradle to grave, assessing whether that stuff is, a really good product, being renewable. And that's getting us into the recap of stuff that we went over. So just a quick recap. These are all the different things that we covered and touched upon, but specifically remember that when you're looking at cradle to cradle stuff, your decisions have big consequences in the long run. As builders, you guys are going to get to make these decisions that are going to change the ultimate long-term duration of stuff. Remember in Japan, we talked about their decision process in building something, right? So if you guys can think about if that roofing material is going to last 100 years, it's going to be much greener. You might have a hard time selling the house initially, you think, but maybe when you come back to it, you're going to be able to say, well, if you were buying a house, let's say, okay, you guys out here, what's an entry-level house cost in San Diego? $1 million? Gotta be $1 million probably, right? So if you're buying $1 million house, wouldn't you want a house with a roof that you're never going to have to fix? Right? So if you can, for a little bit extra money, if you're buying a house for $1 million or maybe $1.1 million, I'm sure you're going to be able to get the extra 0.1 if you can say, well, this house has a roof that's never going to have a problem. It's metal, it's slate, right? So as a builder, those are decisions you can make, and you can use it as a selling point. And what we're finding is people are actually willing to pay it, especially nowadays. There's the lead rating system you guys can check out. And then this last little thing I wanted to show you guys, when you start talking about insulation, remember that there's other products out there. I'm not going to go into detail of these things, but you guys can come and check these out. These are zip panels. This is a thing that's coming. The East Coast has adopted this. The South has adopted this, and it's now hitting Southern California. You guys can come up and check these things out, but it's basically an insulated panel on OSB. It's got the weather barrier, the vapor barrier already glued to it or sprayed on. I don't know how to do that. You can decide for yourself whether you think that's good or not. There's some other installations I have here. This is rock wool. Sometimes people call it mineral wool, but mineral wool is really the same stuff as pink fluffy stuff that you put in insulation in the wall. This is a greener product, if you will, in a lot of ways. This is actually made from rock, crushed rock fibers that are heated up and spooled out into small little bits and pieces that it's a little bit denser. It's a great sound barrier. It's insulative. And you can take a torch to this and it literally won't burn. I could hold on to this with my hand and I could take a torch and I wouldn't burn myself. I could soak this in water and it repels water. It's hydrophobic. So water will just beat off of this. Unlike a lot of the other insulations we use, like the pink fluffy stuff, it will soak it all up and you get that rot in your wall, right? This won't do that. So there's some really cool products out there that aren't much more.
Is that different than the rock wool that you use to grow stuff with?
I don't think so, actually. I think it's the same stuff. Well, I take that back. The minerals that they use to make it may be a little bit different. There are some different.
Yeah, because the rock wool you use to grow stuff absorbs the water. So
yeah. So then that has to be different.
Yeah.
Like
a sponge.
But it's very, they have a similar feel to them. You guys are welcome to come up and check these out. I brought some so you can see it. If I were going to put insulation in my house, this is what I would want nowadays. With having studied all these different insulations, this is the one. We could get into a whole thing on this, but I won't put you guys to sleep. I know it's getting late. Any questions before we wrap up? There's a lot of stuff. I just kind of gave you guys a lot of things to think about because I mean, this whole degree on green technology you guys get into and ways that you can apply this to all aspects of building. It's really a big thing. It's cool. No questions? All right. Well, thank you guys for your attention. I appreciate it. I hope you guys learn something, and you'll be in a job here pretty soon, and you'll be like, oh, I remember that, I could use that. Maybe it'll help you get a job. You'll be talking to a client, and you'll be like, oh, what about this? So, right on. Well, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Monday is what?
Midterm prep, final prep.
Final prep, yeah. So try to make it, try to give you a better grade. So you're excused unless you want to come up and look at some of Dan's materials and, yeah, and then otherwise, go to you Monday.
Thank you.
Oh,
Where's this one at? Daniel?
That's Jay's personal house, Jay Schaefer.
Oh,
That's-
really?
Well, it wasn't Toddy. He got divorced and had to move out of his backyard, so I don't know where it is. Tiny home.
Nice.